All right, let me test this real quick. Looks like it's working. So, here's the thing, people. We have seen that with all these packs that I've opened or whatever, um, I didn't really get my monies back, potentially. However, after opening all the packs, the boxes, everything that I could open for the most part, besides these land packs, which are still over here in the corner, so I'm going to save those. They have the One Ring cards and stuff in them too. Uh, I can't say that I'm disappointed. We got like 4 or 5 normal Nazgul, I think, and a Ring Wraiths. So the only thing, yeah, we got 4 Nazgul and 1 Wraith card. We have, you know, uh, extra black gate cards, stuff like that. Now with the precons, we were supposed to get 1 more additional precon for each of the decks. So we needed the Elven one, the Hobbit one, and then the 2 deals, and I was going to keep those. I was going to order the 4 precons and keep them as they were without any changes. But Amazon kind of messed up, and we haven't really gotten our money back from that yet, as far as I've noticed, so we haven't got to that stage. However, with all of the cards that we pulled from everything, I can't say that I'm disappointed. Like, we might have not got the money back that we were wanting, and I could have just bought these as singles. But, like, we got Gandalf Westward Voyager and Smeagol Helpful Guide, which I think Smeagol Helpful Guide is going to be a good commander for, like, a creatures deck. So the spider deck and everything else, this Old Man Willow, because you can see that the black and green, I'm going to go over some of this a little bit. So Smeagol Helpful Guide, I think, is a commander for his own deck. And it says at the beginning of your end step, and he's a 3-drop. If a creature died under your control this turn, the ring tempts you. Whenever the ring tempts you, target opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped under your control and the rest into their graveyard. So not only do you get lands onto your battlefield, you get to take your opponent's lands and you get to mill cards from your opponent's graveyard, which is interesting for a 3-drop. And he's a 4/2, so he's not too small either. So that's pretty cool. The fact that you can do this, I don't know if that could mean that you could potentially use less lands in your deck or not, since he's a 3-drop. Because you basically just need this and then some Ring Tempts You cards. And you drop them in, you'd play something, and he would steal your lands from your opponent, and you're guaranteed land drops from this. So as long as you have like some low cost Ring Temps cards, and then you have Smeagol down turn 3, you're pretty much set. So I don't think you really need probably as much mana, but that also means that you could have extra mana to play other creatures later on. And then Old Man Willow is a tree folk that's black green. I don't know his story or his backstory, but it says Old Man Willow's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. Whenever Old Man Willow attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or a token. When you do, target creature of an opponent gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So it seems like Old Man Willow would be perfect for Smeagol, and since he has black in his colors, I'm assuming he has kind of a dark lore to him. He's also legendary. And then we also see like the spider, um, Shelob or whatever her name is like a black card, and I think they have a black green version. So honestly, what I'm thinking is like you could do Shelob as the commander potentially, black green, and make a spider deck. But I also think with Smeagol, you could potentially take those cards and make a deck with him, and then you get all of that ramp ability at the beginning. Um, and then like sack cards would allow the ring to tempt you here. So not only could you play sorceries that could tempt you, but you could play sack cards and like make creature tokens, sack the creature token, and then the ring would tempt you with Smeagol, and you would just get free lands every turn. So every time you sack somebody, you're going to get a free land off of it, guaranteed. So imagine if you got 10 sacks, you got 10 turns with Smeagol out. You're going to take 10 lands from somebody's deck, which does thin out their deck a little bit, but also gives you ramp and also um, gives them the potential of not drawing their lands for turn, maybe. But I like the idea, the concept of this, because I've been looking for like who would be the commander over the creatures of Mordor if you were going to do it. And I think Shelob's potentially good, but she has her own little cave. So if you're doing a spider deck, yeah. But if you're doing all of the creatures, I think Smeagol fits pretty good because he's part of the creatures. He hides in the caves. He's around them a lot. So it makes sense that he'd be able to navigate a creature deck. The only problem is that he doesn't have blue in his colors, so he can't do like the Watcher in the Water and stuff like that. But out of all of these cards, I mean, we got a bunch of good artwork. We got some different like cards like Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, and we got Gandalf. We got like a bunch of cards that like Gandalf, Westward Voyager. We got really good artwork, like extended art of him. I think he could also be a potentially really strong card in the deck. But this one's whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, each opponent reveals the top card of the library. If any of those cards share a card type with this that spell, copy that spell. You may choose new target. So whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, basically, so they're going to keep each opponent reveals cards from the top of the library, and then if each of those, you can create a copy of it, and then each opponent draws a card. Otherwise, you draw a card. So potential value here, very strong. Westward Voyager, I don't know if it'd be good or not, but basically he's a 5-drop himself. So if you just made a deck with 5-drop mana value cards and Gandalf, you'd potentially get a lot of value with Gandalf Westward Voyager as a commander. So turn 5, you play him, and then you play a 5-drop creature, and then or 5-drop creature, 5-drop artifact, 5-drop spell. Whatever you do, then you get the potential of copying up to like 3 other cards, which would already be absurd, like absolutely absurd with these decks. The other cool thing is like we have the elf deck, or like elves that we could use for an elf deck. We actually have the commander for the elf deck already as well. But out of all of these cards, we got like pretty much 90 to 100% of everything that we wanted. The only thing that we were missing is a few Nazgul. We got the Lord of the Nazgul. We got Necromancer Sauron. We got a couple of those. We got almost all the lands that we wanted. And then instead of having separate decks, we have a full Mordor deck that has almost all of the creatures and spells and stuff that you would want for the movie inside one deck. We're only missing, um, the Nazgul in here basically, which we have cards that make wraiths, so they're still technically in there, but we'd have to add the Nazgul as their own creature spells if we were going to do it inside of this deck. And we could potentially still run that. It'd just be kind of stuffy in the deck. Now, so overall, I'm pretty glad for the most part. The only thing that we don't really have is an elf deck put together with enough elves, so we still need to get the precon for the elves. The hobbits, I don't really see them as a deck. I don't know the book lore good enough to really justify trying to build a full deck around them. But it seems like they fought Sauron or something at some point, which is kind of interesting. We also got all of these weighted special dice, which I really like from the Lord of the Rings still. So we got 6 of these, which look a lot better than all the other dice that I've been using. They also roll a lot better. They don't roll off the tables and stuff as much. But what I want to show you is, so I'm not going to show you the Mordor deck. So part of me wants to separate the Mordor deck and do the Witch King and Sauron and all of them as separate decks, which we might just buy the precons and separate those and keep this one the way it is with all of them together. But this deck's been working really good for us, and we've added more cards since the last time we played it. So I went through and added more cards from all these ones from the gift bundles, But what I really am going to show you today is the precon for the human deck. Uh, I need to see if we have a bunch of cards that are 5 or greater. I don't think Gandalf Westward Voyager I'm going to add to this deck, but if we have enough 5 drops, potentially I could find a slot. What I'm going to show you, though, is that basically the precon for the humans, you get the Shield Maiden as your commander starting out, and I've tried to play the deck a couple of times with her, and it just doesn't work very well. I'm not able to get enough humans out to really justify putting her as the commander, and it takes her too long to get out. So even when you're summoning humans, she's a 5-drop, so it's kind of rough. Theoden, the king, is basically already kind of, soft in his own right. And then you have, like, the secondary commander you could put in here is Aragorn, King of Gondor, which is probably the better commander to use early game. It's 1 mana less than Eowyn, and it gives you the Monarch as well as some unblockable. So, or at least partially unblockable. So, Monarch ability wise, I think that's pretty strong. But we pulled out of our last gift bundle uh, Aragorn the Uniter, which is the one card that we wanted and didn't have before. So out of all of the packs that we pulled for both the gift bundle and for the uh, collector boosters, the last pack that we opened actually had one of the cards that we wanted in each of them. So I'm kind of happy about that. Now, the benefit to this is it makes you to where you can make a deck that's a little bit more versatile because you only had you had access to 3 colors, and the Uniter has access to 4 colors. So you could build that deck with white cards, blue cards, green cards, red cards, whatever you want in any variety, and kind of adjust the deck to your liking. I will say out of this deck, though, that if you wanted to separate it, which is why I'm probably going to try and get the 4 precons again, uh, I think a Gundor deck could be really good pillow fort wise. And you could use Aragorn, the King of Gondor, or you could use the Steward of Gondor as the commander. I think those are both good options. We only got one Steward of Gondor though, to make a Gondor deck. So Pillow 40 with token generation and card draw would be really good. But I think one of the stronger decks would be Rohan. Particularly, well, in one case we could put it in the Marchesa deck if we wanted to, but like we could replace our Darien in the Marchesa deck with Eomer, King of Gondor. On the other hand, I don't really like him in this deck because it doesn't really fit in with the movie so much, but it does happen at the end of the movie, so it kind of fits. But I think Eomer, King of Gondor, is potentially a really, really good commander, or Eowyn, Fearless Knight could be a really good commander for a Rohan deck. Because Eomer, King of Gondor, he comes in and he gets a +1/+1 counter for each creature you control, and then he deals damage to like any target, I believe, equal to his power. And you get to choose who becomes the monarch. So you can choose yourself, you can choose an enemy and try to bait people to attack an enemy for you. But the thing is that you could flicker him. So you could just go in, bounce him in and out of the game, and then every time he comes in, he's going to get those 1/1 counters and deal damage to a target. So literally, you could just bounce him over and over and burn somebody. You have 10 creatures and you put him down, you're doing 10 damage to an opponent, and then you bounce him again, that's 20 damage, and it's him doing the damage as far as I know. I don't know if that counts as commander damage, but he seems really, really strong in particular. And then Eowyn, Fearless Knight, I like more than the Shield Maiden in particular because when she comes in, she exiles a creature with greater power. Um, so if you flicker her, you can just keep exiling stuff. So she would make a really strong commander that you could just summon in and exile most other people's commanders or really powerful creatures. And then you just bounce her and you just keep doing that over and over again. So I think that's really strong. So you just need those two in a Rohan deck. And then flicker spells, basically, and you could do a whole lot. But this deck here is the Fellowship deck. So I took Aragorn the Uniter, put him as the commander, and I couldn't get any sleep for like 2 days because I was trying to sleep one day and my family couldn't sleep, so they were watching movies, so I didn't sleep. So I stayed up for like 2 days, and then I decided to work on this deck because I was like, whatever. And then I was trying to figure out how to fit all the stuff here. So when we opened up all the gift bundles and everything, we had a ton of spells that you can see in the movies. Um, and in this deck, I have managed to get most, if not all, of the iconic scenes and movie parts into one deck, which I really like. However, we haven't tested this, but although the precon didn't pull out and do very well for me, um, just out of the box, it didn't go. It took too long to activate. You didn't have any flyers. It was pretty bad. I haven't got to test this one yet. However, it does feel very thematic to me just looking at it. I don't have the cards in order anymore for the storyline, but I want to show you basically um, the cards in the setup here. And I will change the name of the stream real quick if I can. Um, so let's go Lord of the Ring movie deck fellowship. Okay. Now, essentially what's happened with these decks is the Mordor deck, we went and put the foil map lands and stuff in the Mordor deck. So it has most of those, if not all of them, and we replaced all the lands with that. We didn't manipulate the mana base very much, if at all, in the Mordor deck. So that's just how that is. Now, also with Sauron, Eowyn Fearless Knight is like a really big counter to Sauron. But uh, any case, all the map lands are pretty much in here because Mordor, they kind of just take over lands. They have a tactical battle plan. They're attacking Middle Earth, and I think it fits very well. Plus, this was the deck that was working very well for me. So when it comes to the Fellowship deck, we have 3 forests that are map lands. So we got one of each forest, basically. We got one of each plains that are map lands, and then we had 3 just foil river islands. But then we ended up taking one of those rivers out. And the thing with that is in the movies, one, we ran out of island map cards and stuff, but in the movies, they never really traveled by water. So I don't think the waters matter as much compared to the other ones. Now, everything else in here is basically either a pre-con land that was already in the deck or iconic areas that we got out of our packs that are in the movies. So these are no longer in order, but I want you to pay attention to um, the creatures, the lands, and the spells and stuff that are in here because we got most of them. Now, to fit this in here, I think the deck had like it was 46. It was 46 or like 50 mana cards in the precon. We dropped it down to 44, I believe. Doing so, we took out the talismans, the Mana Rock talismans for spells that were related to the movies. So like um, Intish Restoration and stuff like that. So I think it's a little bit more iconic, and they potentially could be more powerful. They're kind of iffy on this, but when it comes to the Hobbit cards in here, we do have some food token sub themes. The biggest weakness in this deck right here is that to make every card fit, we had to reduce the mana base, but we also had to get rid of graveyard recursion for the most part. So we have 1 graveyard recursion card in here compared to 2 originally. So Marshall's Anthem is no more in the precon. And we basically took Marshall's Anthem out or land out for the White Tree of Gundor. So potentially you don't have to have that in the deck and you can keep the second resurrection card, Martial Anthem, and I think Martial's Anthem works pretty well in this deck because it gives you +1 to all your creatures, and you can summon them all for the final battle. And the artwork looks like they're heading towards Mordor. The other card that we had to take out for one of those was Now for Wrath, Now for Ruin, which is potentially not a very good card in the deck. I mean, it gives all your creatures +1/+1 and Vigilance till the end of turn. Not super beneficial or amazing or anything, but thematically to the movie, I think it fits. So I'm going to go through the deck, and we're going to go over all the cards in the deck, everything that you need here, which is going to be really good. I don't know if I'll try and get the picture up here. Let me see what it looks like real quick. The picture isn't really great on that, so I probably should have used the laptop for this. But I'm gonna read the art lore stuff on the bottom of the card for each of the cards potentially. And this will give you a list to use if you want to try and make this deck yourself. I haven't play tested it, and we had to remove like some really good spells like Sword to Plowshares and stuff because it wasn't thematic enough for the deck, and we wanted to replace it with spells that were more iconic to the movie. So the first one that we have is Command Tower. It's one of the precon lands. I don't really know about West Farthing, but it says the hobbits of West Farthing said that one could see the sea from the top of that tower, but no hobbit had ever been known to climb it. This isn't particularly from the movie or anything like that. It's a land that you could potentially get rid of, but it adds 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Pretty good. Next, we have Horn of Gondor. You'll also notice in this deck that the lands, so we needed green into the lands, and as I said before, we only added 3 green land cards to the deck, and we did have a legendary land from that was like of Kiwajama or whatever that we pulled out of one of the packs that gave your legendary creatures +1/+1 till end of turn, but we took it out because it wasn't Lord of the Rings themed, and replaced it with an additional land. So there is that. Second card is Horn of Gondor. If you watch the movies, you know what this is. A legendary artifact. It makes a 1/1 human soldier creature token, and then you create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens where etches the number of humans you control. We also got rid of a lot of the sorceries that produced tokens in this deck. They work really well with Eowyn in particular, but I don't think it necessarily matters for Aragorn. We also added one card that we kept in this deck that isn't Lord of the Rings themed and doesn't really fit in the deck, but it kind of does, is Recruit the Worthy. So the artwork on Recruit the Worthy looks pretty good. And I think it fits Gondor pretty well. So you can, I think, pay 1 and then buy back 3 and make a white soldier creature token. Which we could make the elves or whatever you want, really. It's just a soldier. But what's good with Aragorn the Uniter is that you use that card, it comes in, you're going to get that 1/1 white soldier, and then you're going to get a 1/1 white human soldier next to it. So for 4 mana buyback, you're going to get 2 creature tokens, and you can use it every turn, which I like. This Okinawa Temple is the one that we ended up getting rid of. And then these are the spells that we couldn't fit in the deck, but they do kind of fit the theme a little bit. So Press the Enemy is where Aragorn shows his blade to Sauron through the orb in Saruman's temple. It says return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell with equal or less than mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. Potentially a very powerful card, but it's kind of situational and it's good. I'm not sure exactly where I would put that in to make it fit. And we don't have the equipments in the deck, so that's another thing. We had a couple of the equipments kind of just laying around that we could use, but it still would be kind of hard. Slip on the Ring is the 2-drop that exiles target creature you own and then return it to the battlefield under your control. The ring tempts you. Potentially very thematic card. I'm not opposed to this. I would try to fit in there if I could, but compared to the other cards, I just don't think it is as good, and it does protect one of your creatures potentially from a wipe, which would be very nice. But in the movies, it's mainly Frodo that uses this, or Bilbo. So I don't think it's that big of a deal if we're not going to emphasize this. If your commander is Frodo or like Bilbo, I think putting this in your deck would potentially be a lot better. But for like a Fellowship General overall thing, I don't think that's big of a deal. And the last one was the Bath Song. So you get to draw a card, draw 2 cards, and discard a card for 2 turns, and then you get to shuffle any number of target cards from your hand or graveyard into your library, and then you add 2 blue mana on turn 3. So pretty strong, powerful card. I think this could potentially be really good for like an elf deck. I don't know the Bath Song's lore from the books or anything. I figure it's something to do with them going to like Rivendell and like resting and recovering or something. But potentially that would be something that I would replace Marshall's Anthem with in the decks just to be a little bit more thematic. But also with Aragorn the Uniter, it allows you to put them back into your library, which also can help protect you versus like people milling your deck to death. But it's going to give you the ability to recast your spells and get more procs Aragorn the Uniter, even if it is a little bit random, because it's any card from your graveyard into your library. So your spells, your instant sorceries, your artifacts, all that stuff you can put back into your deck, which would be very good. So like if someone countered your what you call it, recruit the worthy, or your Riders of Rohan or whatever, then you could just get it back. And the last card's Martial Anthem. So these are 4 spells that we couldn't really fit in the deck as of yet, unless we get rid of more lands. But I think they could fit thematically in there. So the next card that is inside the deck is a map land foil of Mirkwood Forest. So that's pretty good. And then we have Peridot Took. So we only have a few cards that produce food tokens in this deck. However, there's a couple of reasons why we need food tokens. One, they just give you extra life. They also give you potentially, artifacts to use for something if you needed like an artifact entry ability. This one in particular is a card draw. So if you would, if one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional food token are created, and then sacrifice 3 foods, draw a card. So this could potentially produce a lot of food. The food is going to give you 3 health, and then uh, you can use that to slowly gain health over the course of a game. Or we have Samwise Gamgee in here, so that's our 1 recursion card, green white, that allows us to sacrifice 3 foods to bring back a creature or a historic card, I believe, from your graveyard to your hand, which means that you're going to be able to bring back your creatures and recast them to reproc Aragorn the Uniter. And then Peridot Took is sacrifice 3 foods and draw a card. So if we have a bunch of food and we get him on the ground, or we have him and a bunch of token generation going on, we're going to get a bunch of food and be able to draw a bunch of cards with him, which is going to be really good. The other one that's thematic to the deck is the Lord of the Eagles, the mono white Lord Bird Commander. And when you gain 3 life each turn, you make another eagle. So that's basically going to be this. But this is one of the food generation cards. The next is a land, Buckleberry Fairy. Legendary land. You tap to add a blue, and then pay 1, return Buckleberry Fairy to its owner's hand. So I'm not exactly sure how useful this would be, but it is thematic. It is a legendary land. It does give you blue, and then basically you could put it down, tap it for 1 blue, and then you could take like a colorless mana or something, bounce it to your hand, and then play it again, and then tap it for another blue. So it's basically, um, if you don't have a land, you could use it for filtering your mana a little bit. But thematically, it just works in because you need the fairy, and we had it, and we have it in a really cool foil, so I like that. Next one, we have Path of Ancestry. Oh, actually, The Buckleberry Ferry at the bottom, it says the Brandywide flowed slowly and broad before them. A large flat ferry boat was moored beside the landing. And in the movies, you remember they went across there with the Nazgul chasing them. However, in this artwork, it has that pony with them, and we do not have Bill the Pony in this deck because I don't know anything about Bill the Pony. I'm assuming it's something in the books. The next thing we got is Path of Ancestry, which again you can play for another color, any of color. Mary gazed at the Pukul men with wonder and pity as they loomed up mournfully in the dusk. I don't know exactly what that is, but it was a precon land. And we have Glacial Fortress, another precon land. Uh, we have a bunch of tap lands in here, which is going to slow the deck down a bit. But beneath the moon and under star, we wander far from northern strands. From gnashing of the narrow ice, their shadow lies on frozen hills. Song of Arendelle. So that's pretty good. The next one we have is Arcane Signet. Technically, probably something that we could remove to add in one of those spells that we would like. If I did do that, I would probably replace this with um, the Bath Song or the Marshal's Anthem. But basically adds one color of any of your color identity. I don't particularly want to reduce my mana cards down to like 43, but if we do, this would probably be the one we cut. The thing I like with this is that it's just a signet, it's in the precon, but at the bottom it says magic rings are well magical and they are rare and curious, and it's Gandalf quote, which kind of fits in with the beginning of the Lord of the Rings films, which I kind of like. But if there was going to be a cut, this would probably be the cut. So Arcane Signet, it's on the block. All right. The next card we have is one that we replaced one of the signets with in the deck in the precon, and it's the Ringo South. So it's 3 and a green, so it's pretty expensive, twice as expensive as a signet. But the ring tempts you, which could potentially, give us, card draw or some other advantage that we'd like, plus making one of our creatures legendary. Then reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X lands, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. Put those land cards onto the battlefield tapped and the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. So this is a 4-drop card that could potentially put a bunch of lands from our deck. And you can also say that um, this is any land card. So it doesn't have to be basic lands. Because we only have, I believe, now we have 8 basic lands in this deck, and the rest are all legendaries for the most part, or iconic scenes. So this is a very powerful thing that could get us lands, and we could potentially replace another land from an outside deck as well, because they don't have Castle of Ardenvale in the deck at all, which I think would be really good. Maybe they have one that's Minas Tirith. I don't think we have a Minas Tirith land in this deck yet. But I think that's something that I need in here at some point is like a Minas Tirith land. But I think a Castle Ardenvale does look appropriate for Minas Tirith almost, except for it's missing the mountain, and it does produce human tokens, which would be really good for this deck as well. Actually, we have I think we have one over here that I was going to use in the Marchesa deck. I need to look real quick. All right, so we have one, but we potentially need to get another one. So this is Castle Ardenvale. You can see, I mean, it's a little foggy on this cam, but you can see that it's kind of round like Minas Tirith and stuff. So maybe I'll make a proxy land or something of it. Get a picture of Minas Tirith and stick on there and put it in the deck. But enters the battlefield tapped unless you control planes, and you can tap it to add 1 mana. You can pay 4 and create a 1/1 white human creature token. And it says, without Ardenvale's loyalty, the realm would greedily devour itself. So I really like this card. I think it fits Lord of the Rings for Minas Tirith pretty well. And I think we need to make it. I mean, it looks pretty close to like Minas Tirith in general. And then producing humans, I think would be really good. It's something that we could use in the deck in general, even though it costs 4 mana. The other thing is that there is a creature card that we didn't add to this deck because it's just a general Gundor creature that produces a token each turn. But that is also pretty powerful. I just think being able to make a creature token on a land, and specifically the card art here, is really good. Yeah, we might. I'm very tempted to like replace Arncane Signet or something with this, or a Plains card potentially with this. So I'm gonna keep this on the side for now. I like the idea of being able to produce the tokens on demand, and also since we have a card that can search it, would be really good. But uh, I'll keep it with the Marchesa deck for right now because it doesn't fit. But I think there's a lot of potential there for a Minas Tirith version of that card. So in the deck, the ring goes south. So I think this is after they get done talking with Faramir and stuff in the river. Ring tempts you. You get to search for X lands where it's the number of legendary creatures you control. This deck is mainly legendary creatures besides tokens that we can generate. So we have like 20 or 30 options to actually proc this. So you could potentially get 1, 2, 4, 5, 10 lands out of your deck, and it could be any number of lands. So there's a lot of potential power here that you could have in your deck. Um, so that's really good. And it fits it with the movies in general. And then we have Elrond, Master of Healing. So a couple of creatures have two or three versions of the card in the deck. I think just two versions was the most. Um, Mainly because we could not fit every version of every card in this deck. So generally, the most that we have is two versions of each. There simply wasn't enough. So right now we have one or two versions of each of the different creatures that are in the Lord of the Rings movie. And basically what's happened is um, if they were really high mana costs or we just didn't have any use for them in the deck for the most part, they got cut. So Elrond has two cards. So this one is the green blue, two green blue legendary creature Elf Noble. Whenever you scry, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of cards looked at while scrying this way. And with Aragorn the Uniter, when you play a blue spell, you're going to get a scry. So even when we play this, we can get a scry and get a 1/1 counter on a creature. And whenever a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you can draw a card. So it's +1/+1 counters, as well as getting a draw, and as well as getting a scry, and I think +4/+4 because it also has green on a creature when we play it for 4 mana. So has a lot of bonuses here. And then the other version of Elrond is just Elrond, Lord of Rivendell, which I think plays into the movie pretty well, having two versions of him, because when they first go to Rivendell, they meet Elrond for the first time. That's Lord of Rivendell. And in here, it's like when you scry, I think the ring tempts you or something, or whenever you're tempted, you get to draw a card. So it's draw a card or scry, blue, which is automatically going to let us scry, and it fits in with the movie because that would be the first time that they found him. And then Elrond, Master of Healing, would be like the second time when someone was dying or something, they go back to get healing. And this is also really good card art. So 4/4 for 4, +1/1 counters, plus card draw, plus getting a buff for a creature for a turn, plus getting a scry off of it for 4 mana. I think that's very good value, and looks really cool. It's a really cool card art. Next one we got is Faramir, Steward of Gondor. This doesn't necessarily feel like it fits with the movies, but potentially it does because he is technically the Steward of Gondor, I guess, after his father and stuff dies. We also have one copy of Denethor in here because you can't fit the white-black version of him, but in the precon there is a blue version of him automatically that is also thematic, and we'll get to that when we see him. But with Faramir, Steward of Gondor, he's a 3-drop. Whenever a creature with mana value 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you become the Monarch, which means once we get to play Aragorn the Uniter, while he's on the field, you're going to become the Monarch, which is pretty good. At the beginning of your end step, if you are the Monarch, create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, and the last Steward of Gondor begs leave to surrender his office. So I think that's pretty good in general. It's going to put Monarch into play. It's going to give us 1/1 tokens if we're the thing, and then also with 4 or greater legendary creature with 4 or greater comes in. That's pretty common. So even without Aragorn, we could put almost any of our creatures into play and proc this and become the Monarch, which is pretty useful. Next is Court of Ire. This is a potential cut from the deck if you wanted, but I think the ability is a bit too strong to leave. So it's 5 mana. When Court of Ire enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, which so basically you're at least getting 1 card off of this for 5 mana and probably more. But at the beginning of the upkeep, Court of Ire deals 2 damage to any target, so creatures or players, etc. And then if you're the Monarch, it deals 7 instead. And then at the bottom it says, "How long is it since Sauron bought you? What is the price?" So this is where Eowyn was fighting Wormtongue uh, in the Rohan Castle or whatever in the movie. But every turn you're going to do at least 2 damage and then potentially 7 damage to a target creature, which could already wipe out most things. And then you could even do it to a player, which is going to do a lot of burn damage over time if they don't get rid of this. So I think it's a really powerful card. Fits in pretty well, so that's why it's kept. The next was the last addition onto this deck that we ran into while just looking randomly through our cards trying to find a different card, and I ran into it. And it's a symbol, the Entmoot. So this is a 4-drop green enchantment. Creatures you control have reach, which is actually pretty good. It also means that our Gondor soldiers and stuff are going to get to use their bows and kind of kill some creatures in the air. Sacrifice, assemble the Entmoot, and you can create 3 tapped XX green treefolk creature tokens, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn, and you can put a reach counter on them. So, and at the bottom it says boom boom, rum boom, bora boom boom, dar rar boom boom, dar rar boom. So this thematically is where Pippin and Merry are with Treebeard, and they assemble the Entmoot to try and get them to fight Sauron. Creatures you control just get reach is pretty interesting in general. It just means that we're going to put this on the field, and we're going to get basically protection from flying for a little bit. Not necessarily a big theme in the deck, doesn't really matter, but if it is on the field, it's going to be kind of nice to be able to block flyers. But sacrificing it, you could potentially get 3 very large Treefolk Trigger tokens. So this is another thing that if we have a bunch of food tokens that we haven't used, we could dump those food tokens at 1 turn and sack this and make some really big Treefolks with reach, which I think could be really good against Sauron, and it fits the movie theme. The next we have Pippin, Guard of the Citadel. So you have to kind of choose what creatures you're going to add into the deck in general. And they do have Merry and Pippin of Isengard, which I think is their own sort of decks potentially because they're partner commanders. But they make creature tokens, I think. But Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, I think fits a little bit better into the Lord of the Rings. And also, we don't have the other Pippin card that goes with the partnership. So I don't know exactly what its abilities are, and it's something we didn't have. But this is Vigilance with Ward 1, so it automatically gets a little bit of protection. Could potentially swing under some of our creatures if we make it a Ring Bearer. Tap another creature you control gains protection from the card type of your choice until end of turn. So potentially a really strong effect, like a Mother of Ruins type of card, but also just protection from just cards in general. So it doesn't really have to be a specific color, which I don't know if that's better or worse than most things. But we have a few different versions of card art here. So we picked the card art that fits probably the best with the movie. But we also have the ring foil version of this that has him underneath the pyre saving Faramir. So, but I went with this card art for now. The next card is one of the spells, Erwin's Gift. So this is where Frodo gets the the star or whatever from her. Uh, Spell costs one less to cast if you control two or more legendary creatures, which is potentially something that we could do. So it's 4 mana right now, but we could potentially get uh, this out for 3, and then we get a scry 2, and then draw 2 cards, which isn't too bad. There's also cards that we can get effects with for scrying in this deck, so I don't think that's a bad spell to have. And at the bottom it says, wear this now in memory of Elfstone, an evening star with whom your life has been woven. And then the next card of the deck is another forest. This one is the old forest. So you'll see in this deck, the lands that we had left that we put in, we actually put kind of the more rare areas that they weren't in for a long time, I think, um, as one land, and then the other lands are basically the areas that they're mostly in the movies, I think. But this is the old forest, forest land. And then the next card is Treebeard, Gracious Host. So we get a 4-drop, so we get 2 green, white. So that means we're going to get 1 soldier token playing him, and a 4/4 buff, I believe, for playing him. And he has Trample and Ward 2. When Treebeard, Gracious Host enters the battlefield, create 2 foe tokens, which means we could potentially get some life gain or something from him. And then whenever you gain life, put that many 1/1 creature tokens or counter tokens counters on target halfling or tree folk. So you can boost your halflings, or you can boost Treebeard himself, because he's the only int besides the intish meeting thing that we have. So trample, ward 2, so you got some protection. The 2 food tokens, I don't know if you're going to get 3 1/1 counters sacking 1 token, or just 1 1/1 counter. I think it would just be 1, but I'm not sure. But you get to boost something up just in general, and then if we do happen to have food tokens on the field, you're going to be able to produce a really big creature with this, which is pretty nice. And it's automatically going to give you like 6 life anyway, just playing it for 4 mana, and it's a 0/3, so not too bad. And it fits in with the movie. And at the bottom it says, I go my own way, but your way may go along with mine for a while. And the next is a map foil land of Rohan. It's a plains. As Rohan and Gundor next to each other, kind of shows you the map. Next one is Furycom Snarl. The shadow departed from the sun was unveiled, and the light leapt forward. Just one of the precon lands. And then we got Aramir, King of Gundor. It's a 5-drop. So we're going to get to do a 3 damage to a target player when we play him, as well as get a soldier token for 5. And then he has double strike, enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each other human you control, so this could potentially be very powerful. And then enters the battlefield, target player becomes the monarch, so we could potentially give ourselves the monarch card with this and get 1 card draw. And then it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So basically, this is going to come in, and if Aragorn the Uniter is on the field, we're going to get 3 damage to a target opponent, as well as a soldier token. And then we're going to get a really big Aramir, potentially, with double strike. We're at least going to get a 3 counters on it when he comes in. And then, so that means it's going to do at least 5 damage to a player or a target, so it's removal or something, as well as get the Monarch. So it's going to be a card draw. So there's a lot of benefits here. And if you had flicker cards, which, there's a couple of cards you can put in from the Lord of the Rings stuff to flicker him. I think like 2 in general. One's repeatable. This could be a very, very powerful guy. But I think he works very well. He does technically show up in the Lord of the Rings movie at the end, so I'm not super opposed with him. But we did cut the Aramir Rider of Rohan from the deck because he's just a mono red drop, and he has to have the most power of all creatures to make a soldier token. I just don't think he was really that good. And he didn't play like a major part in the movie. I mean, she showed up and you met him, and then he just like went and gathered the Rohirrim, and then he joined in the battle. So we have a couple of cards that basically are him leading Rohan's soldiers into the battlefield. So I'm not super worried about not having the original version of him in the deck, since we have something else that kind of replaces him. The next is one of the island cards that we had that's just a river. So we got this foil river, which kind of makes sense to me. So these are the only ones. We have 2 of these in the deck now because we had more sources of blue mana in our mana pool than everything else. So we had like almost 20. We had like 19 or 20 abilities that could make blue mana, which is kind of interesting. The next is Port Town, another precon land. Not exactly sure where this is, but enters battlefield. You may reveal a plains or island card from your hand. If you don't, it enters battlefield tapped. So it's probably going to enter the battlefield tapped because we just don't have that many of those lands. There at Pargar lay the main fleet of Umbar, 50 great ships and smaller vessels beyond count. So I don't know if this necessarily fits in a good fellowship deck because the Umbar are like pirates, I believe, and I think they were against the humans and stuff. I'm not sure, but it is a source of both white and blue mana. So even if it comes in the battlefield tapped, I think the tap lands are probably the worst thing about this deck so far. Next is another spell from the movie that we had to add. Horses of Brunnen for 5 mana. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hand, and then scry 1, the ring tempts you. The black horses were filled with madness and leapt forward in terror. They bore their riders into the rushing flood. So this is where I would like to say Eowyn causes the rivers to flood and hit the Nazgul while Frodo was poisoned. So I think this is a very good card to have in the deck, thematic to the movies. The next is we have Evolving Wilds. So we have 2 sack lands that we put back in here. This is basically just to kind of thin the deck out a little bit. So you put it in, you sack it. It's basically, a tapped basic land. Worst case scenario, we don't have any basic lands left, and this is useless. But we have, 8 lands, and they're the only 8 lands in the deck. So I highly doubt that there's not going to be any lands that we're going to pull when this comes in. And then worst case later on, we got a bunch of lands out, and this is just a dead drop. But I don't think it's super likely that we're gonna pull all 8 of our lands out necessarily. So I don't know. But there is quite a bit of scrying and draw in this deck that we could use. So who knows? Next card is Path of Exile. So you can also do Expel from Emerus or whatever, but it's like 5 mana. We also got rid of Sword of Plowshares, but this is basically where Wormtongue gets exiled from Rohan. The other one has better looking art potentially. It does the same thing basically though, uh, with a less utility, and it also costs a lot more mana. But this says, "Go now, Wormtongue, whither you be. But then, if we ever meet again, I shall not be merciful, but Theoden." And then it's exile target creature. Its controller may search his library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tapped. So it has some versatility because we can use this on an enemy creature in exile, or we could use it on our own and exile it and get ourselves a land. So we could potentially search for a basic land with this as well. Um, and thematically, it would work both ways because you got to exile Wormtongue from your own forces, or you can exile him from your enemy's forces. So thematically, I think that's really nice. The next that we have is from the precon. This is Supreme Verdict, so a very powerful board wipe. 1, 2 white, and a blue. Spell can't be countered, destroy all creatures. And at the bottom it says, there rose a huge shape of shadow, impenetrable, lightning crowned, filled of all the sky. Enormous it reared above the world, irritable but impotent. For even as it leaned over them, a great wind took it, and it was all blown away. Now, as much as you probably won't really agree with this, you can see the card art on there. It's kind of this beam of light hitting. Um, I kind of put this into potentially 2 parts in the movie. So there is a exile card that comes in the precon that I removed because it's just not like a solid removal. But with this, I take it as either the moment that Gandalf showed up with the Rohirrim at Gondor, I believe, and the sun shone and they ended up destroying all the orcs. I think that's potentially one way to look at this. The other one would be is that Gondor, when he goes out and shines his light and scares off the Nazgul and stuff from killing Faramir's forces or whatever. But uh, the banishing spell would probably have been a better spell for that one thematically. But this one isn't too bad, and we could still add the Banishing spell instead as one of the removal, the card that we might remove. We could, like that Signet, we could easily put that Banishing Light there, and then Gandalf would have another spell. But I particularly think this board wipe works for the Gandalf leading the Rohirrim in and killing the orcs, so that's potentially good. The next one we have is fourth Aerlingus, so X and then red white. So you're going to get 3 damage to an enemy plus a soldier token. Create X 2/2 red human creature tokens with trample and haste. Whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to one or more players this turn, you become the monarch. So it's another monarch card, as well as some damage and some soldier tokens, as well as a bunch of 2/2 human knights with trample and haste. So you're going to swing in, probably going to get some damage plus an extra card draw for however much mana that you want. Minimum, you just pay 2 mana and you don't get any soldiers, but you still, could potentially get the monarch. But the bottom says a sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises, ride now, ride now, ride to Gondor. So this is also where Gandalf and the Rohirrim come to save Gondor, I believe. So we got 2 cards that kind of fit in with that theme. Thematically, I like it. Potentially, if you have 10 mana, you make 10, night tokens with haste. Pretty powerful, even if they are 2/2s with just trample. We don't have access to a bunch of counter generation, but we do have access to some counter generation. As well as when these come in, I mean, you could potentially generate things if you have like the Shield Maiden. Every time those human knights come in, you could make another 2/2 knight or something. Then we have Prairie Stream. This is like outside of Gondor or Isengard. Um, White blue land. It says Aragorn saw the river like a ribbon laid down to Plairgir, and beyond was a light of the sky that spoke of the sea. And Gandalf said, "This is your realm, and the heart of the greater realm that shall be." Interesting. Next is Theowen, King of Rohan. So potentially a card that I didn't want in this deck and I would cut. However, movie thematically, he has to be in there. And basically he's a human noble, 3-drop. You're potentially going to get 3 damage to an opponent and a soldier creature token for playing him, and he's 2/3. So whenever Theoden, King of Rohan, or another human enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So for 3 mana, you're getting a 2/3 body and potentially 3 damage on an enemy and potentially a soldier token. But as well as him and the soldier token coming in, that means that you get 2 procs of double strike on that turn as well, which is potentially pretty good. And it says, Dark have been my dreams of late, but I feel now awakened. I only fear that already that you have come too late, Gandalf. So potentially a lot of value. Some of these cards that aren't super strong, it's just if Aragorn's on the field, they have a lot more effect. I don't particularly like the red ability, like draining people, but it's whatever. The next is something that isn't particularly from the movies, but I just put in here anyway. But it's Prince Imrahil the Fair. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So potentially we could get rid of this. I assume he has something to do with the books, but I'm not positive. So I stuck him in here anyway because maybe he has some sort of, important area in the books that he's needed to. And he can, make soldier tokens if we draw a second card each turn. If not, you could replace him like with any of these spell cards or uh, the Gondor creature that basically does the same thing but without needing to draw a card each turn. And I think it also lets you tap stuff when creatures come in. But I think Imrahil, I mean, 2-drop. So you spin them for 2, you get a 2/2, and then you potentially get a 1/1 white soldier creature token, and then you potentially get a scry. And then if you get to draw another card, you get a 1/1 as well. So I don't know, potential cut, but also probably needs to be in the deck. Next is another mana card that we added in place of a Signet. This one's Elven Course, so 3 and a green. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library, and then creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So it's mana fixing. It's potentially supposed to be in an Elven deck, but I think it could be, somewhat thematic. I don't know. At the bottom it says an Elbereth Gilthanil Silverin, Pana, Miral, O, Mangle, Aglar, Ineth. I don't know. But in my head, I just think that they probably did this when they free forged the sword or whatever. Maybe that would make sense. I don't know. But the mana fixing seems cool, and it's in the deck. So, whatever. It's just having a lot of ability to create tokens and then being able to make those tokens where they can produce mana, I just think could be really strong for us. Especially if, say, like you had assemble the Intmoot in this card out, then you could tap all your creatures and then make that many Ints with that many 1/1 counters on it. Or, like, if you have the night generating card, you could just dump and make, like, double your creature tokens with trample and haste. So potentially something there. Next is Flame of Anor. So you get 3 mana. So you get 1 blue red. So potentially playing this, you could get 1 scry, 3 damage to an opponent, and you choose one. And then if you control a wizard, as you cast a spell, you may choose 2 instead. So we have 2 Gandalfs in this deck, I believe. So you could potentially get 2 triggers off of this, but one is target player draws 2 cards, so you could potentially get 1 scry, 3 damage, and 2 extra cards with this at the minimum. Then you can destroy a target artifact, which is potentially pretty good, or you can do 5 damage to a target creature. So you get creature removal, artifact removal, or draw 2 cards. So pretty good, and it fits pretty well with Gandalf as one of his abilities. So I like it. Plus the card art is really cool. Next is the only Legolas that we have in the deck because there wasn't enough room. Originally, we were going to do the kill counters, but I don't think they really give you enough benefit for what they do. So we get Legolas Greenleaf. He has reach, can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. And whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on Legolas Greenleaf. Whenever Legolas Greenleaf deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So you get +1/+1 counters on it. Can't be blocked by low-level creatures, and then so potentially this could swing through and deal a bunch of damage. But we have a lot of legendary creatures in the deck, so he could potentially get big over time. And it's card draw, so I can't really complain. It's a 3-drop. One of your creatures, when he comes in, could potentially get like 4/4 or whatever the ability is. So I think it's pretty good. And then thematically, I think it fits a little bit better than the kill counter. Kill counter works pretty well in general. Because if your opponent's creatures die, it gets bigger. But they cost more, or they require twice the mana. There's a lot of negatives that could potentially happen. I don't know what I did with my commander card, though. That's the problem. It might have gotten shuffled in here. Yeah, there it is. Okay. I need to look at the commander real quick. So the commander is Aragorn the Uniter. So we got the Django looking art. So it's pretty interesting. And so whenever you cast a white spell, you create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, you get a scry 2. So you actually get 2 scries off that, which is pretty good. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragorn the Uniter deals 3 damage to target opponent. So I don't know if that is considered commander damage or not, but if it is, that's pretty big. Whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets 4/4 until end of turn. So you get a creature buff for 4/4. I mean, just casting the green spell. So Legolas is going to get 4/4 to something for at least a turn, which is pretty nice of its own. So I like that. The next one that we have is Bilbo, retired burglar. So you know him from the movies, so we needed a Bilbo. He also enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield to ring tempt you. So you're going to get at least 2 ring temps off of him, which is pretty good. But when he deals damage to a player, you get to create a treasure token. So that's pretty good as well. And you get the blue and the red. So you're going to get to do 3 damage to an opponent. And get to scry 2 and get 2 ring triggers and potentially treasure tokens for ramp. So pretty good. Plus, he's probably going to be unblockable from most big creatures, which is pretty good. And that kind of fits in with everything. Then we have the Great Hall of the Citadel. So you can add 1 mana or 2 mana of any color combinations, only to cast legendary spells, which there's a lot in here. And then it says, renewed shall the blade that was broken. renewed shall be the blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be King Bilbo. So artwork's really nice. We got more foil on that. All that stuff looks really good. And then we have Eowyn the Indomitable. So this is the only Eowyn we have in the deck. I think it works pretty good. It's a 2-drop green blue, so you get a 4/4 onto a creature. You also get to scry 2 when you cast her, and then when you scry 2, you put a 1/1 counter on any target creature. So she, at minimum, she could come in, um, and put I think 2 1/1 counters on herself. So 2-drop for 4/4, and then you can pay 6 and scry 2, and get 2 more 1/1 counters. So potentially every turn you could pay 6, scry 2, and get 2 1/1 counters, which would be pretty strong on her in general. Elf Noble, good artwork in the deck. Next is Gandalf the Grey. So this one's kind of interesting. So for 5, you get to scry 2 with the blue. You get to do 3 damage to an opponent with the red. And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one that hasn't been chosen. So potentially if we get to cast instant or sorceries, which there is a decent amount, I believe, in here. There's probably like 20 or so. We can either tap or untap a target permanent, so that's pretty interesting. Could use that in defense or offense. Gandalf the Grey deals 3 damage to each opponent. I mean, not the best, not the worst. I mean, it does a little bit of burn. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. I think that's potentially really strong because we could do that for the token making cards or anything like that. We could do that for damage. We could do it for card draw. There's all kinds of things here. And then we could also put Gandalf on the top of the owner's library. So even if we didn't use 3 damage to each opponent or the tap thing, we could put him down for 5, scry 2, do 3 damage to an opponent, then cast an instant or sorcery spell and copy it. And then our second spell, we could just put him back into our library. And then we could play him again later. But he's also a 3/4 for 5, so not terrible. But basically, we get to cycle him back into our library. He could come back and be pretty useful probably again. So that's pretty good. Next, we got Riders of Rohan. So this is a 5-drop red-white. So you're going to be able to do 3 damage to a target opponent and get a 1/1 soldier token. And if for 5 mana, you get a 4/4 as well. So pretty good value. When Riders of Rohan enters the battlefield, create 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. So for 5 mana, you get 3 damage on an opponent, a 1/1 soldier, and 2/2 red knight. So you're getting 9 damage right out of the beginning for 5 mana, which is pretty good. But you can pay 6 mana and do dash, which uh, it gains haste, so you get a swing in it. So you could potentially get uh, 8 damage off the same turn it came in. And then the beginning of the end step, it would go back to your hand. So potentially for 6 mana, you could get 8 damage in. Keep 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste, 3 damage to opponent, and keep a soldier token. So basically 6 mana, you can get 8 damage in, and then you get 3 creatures. Actually 11 damage in, and you get 3 creatures. And you can do that every turn. So this right here is a pretty interesting card. Next one is one that we had to cut a land for, which I'm not necessarily happy about, but it's okay. 4-drop, now for Wrath, now for Ruin card. So you get a white, so you get basically 4 mana for a soldier, and then put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control, which could potentially be really big or kind of crappy. And they gain Vigilance at the end of turn and the Ring Tempshu. So here, I mean, the best case scenario, you have a few creatures on board, you play this, they all get 1/1. So say you got like 5 creatures, you're going to get an additional 5 damage, as well as another soldier token and a Ring Tempt, which could put the ring back on one of your creatures, which could be beneficial. So card draw, potentially. And then basically at the bottom, the captains of the West came at last to challenge the Black Gate and Might of Mordor. So that's pretty good. I don't know if this really fits the movie or not, because in the movie they use this for I thought they used it for the Battle of Helm's Deep, but I might be wrong. Next is Denethor Stoneseer, so 2-drop, 1 blue, so you get a Scry 2 potentially. And then it enters the battlefield Scry 2. So potentially if Aragorn's on the battlefield, you get a Scry 4, which is pretty good. And then you get to pay 3 in a red, sacrifice it. Target player becomes a monarch, so you or someone else. And then it deals 3 damage to any target. So potentially a creature removal as well as a card draw for 4. And then you get to scry 4 when it comes in, so not terrible. And then you may triumph on the field for a day, but against the power that now rises, there is no victory. So that is Denethor, Steward of Gondor, but Stoneseer there. Next we have Mines of Moria. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. You can add a red, or you can pay 4, exile 3 cards from your graveyard, create 2 treasure tokens. Ideally, you'd want to exile your sorcery and instant spells because you're probably not going to get them back because we don't have any sort of recursion for that. So we can use those for ramp after we use them the first time. The second thing, though, is that if we needed to do that, I mean, we could basically increase the amount of mana that we have on the field if we had nothing else to do that turn. So pretty interesting. Next is Clifftop Retreat. So this is a white or red. The dwelling of Rohirrim lie under the wooden eaves of the White Mountain, hidden in the mists and clouds. So pretty nice Rohan castle. Next is the only Grimly that we have in the deck because we couldn't fit any more versions of him. So this is Grimly of the Glittering Caves. So you get 2 in a red, so 3-drop. And then you're going to get to do 3 damage to opponent if Aragorn's on the field. So that already is pretty good. I mean, basically 3 mana to do 3 damage. But he has double strike, even though he's a 1/1, which is pretty good. But whenever another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can put a 1/1 counter on Grimly the Glittering Cave. So if he comes in early, potentially get a pretty good striker that could do some combat damage and make a couple treasure tokens. So 1 or 2 treasure tokens, which would be pretty good. And then, if you put any other legendary creatures down, he's going to get bigger. And I think it fits pretty well, and he's already going to do 3 damage to something if Aragorn's down, so I'm not super opposed to him. Turn 3, if he comes down and somebody doesn't have any creatures, we get to swing in twice and make 2 treasure tokens. And then at the bottom it says, no dwarf could be unmoved by such loveliness. So I think that's probably, a pretty decent card. You can see both Grimly and Legolas in this deck. They're not necessarily the strongest versions of the card, but they're pretty good early game and potentially decent late game if you have legendary creatures in her, which I'm not opposed to. The next card is the Shire, so we got a full art Shire, I believe. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. You can tap and add a green, pay 2, tap, and then tap an untapped creature you control to create a food token. So this is an additional way to make food tokens. I think we have 3 or 4 cards that make food tokens repeatedly, so that's good for us. Next is Throne of the High City. Potentially you could replace this if you wanted, but it's another source of the Monarch. You tap, add a colorless, you can pay 4, sacrifice it, you become the Monarch, so potentially a card draw for 4. The High Throne is empty, and at the foot of its dais, upon the lowest step, which was broad and deep, there was a stone chair, black and unadorned, of the Steward of Gondor. So pretty good thematic card, like it. The next is one that we had to cut an additional land for. So this is the Flowering of the White Tree. At the bottom, Aragorn planted the new tree in the court of the fountain, and swiftly and gladly it began to grow. And then it says legendary creatures you control get 2/1 and have ward 1. Non-legendary creatures you control get 1/1. So potentially a buff to our creatures. It's not too bad. We get 1/1 white soldier creature token apparently, which will become a 2/2. And then legendary creatures get ward 1, so that's, all right. The main problem with this deck, though, is just that we don't have a lot of recursion. So if something dies until we get Samwise out, we're kind of in a bad spot. So next we got Sulphur Cliffs, blue or red. You should see the waterways of Dale, Frodo, and the fountains and the pools. You should see the terraces and towers upon the mountainsides glowing. So that's pretty good. Then we got a Rohan and Gondor plain foil land. Then we got the Call for Aid from the movie. So 5-drop, gain control of all creatures target opponent controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures. You gain haste until end of turn. Can't attack player. You can't sacrifice those creatures this turn. And it says, we must hasten. The beacons of Gondor are alight. War is kindled, Gandalf. So this is pretty good. The thing is if you made a Gondor deck, you wouldn't be able to use this, which kind of sucks. But if you had a Rohan deck, you could still light this. I mean, it fits both. Because the Call for Aid comes from Gondor, but they don't have access to these colors unless you have Aragorn as your commander. But if you had a Rohirrim deck, you could still use this and basically say that you're taking control of someone else's forces to muster up your army and then marching in to help save Gondor. So it works both ways potentially. I like it though, thematic. The next is the Breaking of the Fellowships. This is when Boromir tries to take the ring from Frodo. 1 and a red, so potentially get 3 damage to something for 2 anyway. Target creature an opponent controls deals damage equal to its power to another target creature that player controls, and the ring tempts you. Now, this doesn't necessarily fit exactly, but it says it might have been mine, it could have been mine, give it to me. So I think the ability wise, this seems to fit better in like an evil deck. Like the evil deck is tempting Boromir, and he's like killing off a couple things. But in the good version of the deck, in the movie anyway, Boromir tries to take the ring, but then he dies defending, the hobbits. So you could just say that this is him defending the hobbits and all that stuff would be good. And we do have a Boromir in the deck. You can swap either one out. So you have Boromir, the Protector of Gondor, which when he comes into the battlefield or taps, you get to like search the top 6 cards for, I think, a creature or human or something, or an artifact, and put it in your hand. Or you can do the other one, which you can sack it to sacrifice and give protection to things. I think either's good, but I think we went for the search card, which just to give some more filtering to our deck and try to get through the cards. Next card we got is the Isle Calling. Full art or extended art here. I don't really know. This is another enchantment, so 1 and a blue, so 2-drop. Potentially we could get Scry 2 for 2. And then whenever you scry, put a verse counter on Isle Lost Calling. So at the minimum, you could play this and then scry 2 from Aragorn and get 2 scry counters on it. And then you could pay 6, exile Isle Lost Calling, draw a card for each verse counter on Isle Lost Calling. If it had 7 or more verse counters on it, take an extra turn after this one. So potentially a pretty strong card that you could use to fill your hand back up over time, or pull a lot of cards from your deck to your hand and kind of play stuff that you need, as well as take an extra turn, which could be very powerful. But you see that even this, I mean, you're getting 2 counters on cast potentially with Aragorn, so you'd only need like 3 spells to come down, 3 or 4 spells to get the calling on there. Next is Limbus Bread. So 2-drop. Enters battlefield, scry 1, then draw a card. So you're getting 2, you get a draw and scry, so that alone is pretty good for me. And then you can pay 2, sacrifice it, gain 3 life, which means that you could potentially use the Limbus Bread for Treebeard to get some 1/1 counters. You can use it for the Eagle to produce another Eagle, as well as just getting the benefits of drawing a card and all that stuff. And then when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, its owner shuffles it into its library, so basically you can just keep using this over and over and get multiple effects, and I think it's perfectly fine. I would use some Limbus Bread, and the scry and draw thing is pretty cool. It would be really cool is like if you could if you had something to consistently search out uh artifacts from your deck, or in this sense it's like a normal artifact. If you just copy this, and basically if you just kept copying it, you keep getting to scry and draw a card and then sack it and gain life and over again. That'd be pretty cool. Next is Battlefield Forge. So you can do 1 for just mana, or you could do red and a white. And in the morning I shall ride to Edoras together to the gathering of the Mark, Theoden. So good land, fits in thematically. Next we have the 1-drop You Cannot Pass. So we could get a 1/1 soldier from this. It says says destroy target creature that blocked or was blocked by a legendary creature this turn. And it says it raised the whip and thongs wind and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, but Gandalf stood firm. So you can know this from the iconic part of the movie. We also got the foil art and stuff of it, so it looks really nice. And so that fits in perfectly with the movie. Next, we have Windbrisk Heights. So you get Hideaway 4. This is from the pre-con. Enters the battlefield. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Exile one face down. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. Enters tapped, and you can add a white mana, and then you can pay 1 white. Tap. You may play the exile card without paying its mana cost if you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn. So potentially something useful that you could use. The artwork's pretty good. So it's in the pre-con, so I keep it in there. The tap lands are kind of poo, but you know, can't really complain. Precon mana. Next is Secluded Courtyard. Enters battlefield, choose a creature type. You can tap, add 1 mana, and then add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells of the chosen type or activate an ability of a creature or creature card of the chosen type. So, not exactly sure what we would choose here, because there is a few humans in the deck. There's quite a few humans in the deck that we could use this in, but you could also do nobles. So I would say probably do nobles, since most of our cards are nobles. Well, not most of them, but there's a good portion of cards that are nobles. There's more cards that are potentially humans, but you also got like dwarf wizards and all that stuff kind of like breaking the things up. So I don't really know what the best is. Probably nobles or humans. Doesn't really matter though. Next is Samwise Gamgee. So this is the only recursion card that we have left in the deck, which is kind of sucks, but it's whatever. In the movies, if they died, I mean, they'd pretty much die anyway. There's not a whole lot you could do. But green and a white, so 2-drop for a 2/2, and then, you know, it would kind of suck if you pulled this out first because you wouldn't have a way to get it back later. Um, so we probably do need to replace a card to get a second recursion at some point. But whenever a non-token creature enters battlefield, trade a food token. So get it out early. We could get some food tokens, which would be really nice. And then we can sack 3 food tokens, return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can get your legendary creatures back. I think legendary equipment and sagas and things like that. So I think you'd potentially you could do Marshall's Anthem with this, but the Bath Song might be better because Samwise Games you'd be able to actually recycle the Bath Song and put it in your hand, and then if he died, you could play the Bath Song and then put all your creatures back in your hand or in your library, which could be interesting. But yeah, I just think this is a pretty decent card. If we're able to get food tokens in general, it's a little weak, but could potentially get decent. I mean, you're getting life gen off of it, if anything, which could buff up Treebeard, could buff up your Eagles, can give you 1/1 counters depending on what cards we have on the field, as well as give life. So I can't really say, because we don't have a whole lot of life link or anything in this deck. Next is Thought Vessel. Potentially something we could cut, but I think having no maximum hand size would be really good in the deck in general. Plus, has some benefit. So, grudgingly, Lord Denethor permits me to look among his hoarded scrolls and books, Gandalf. So, when he's doing research, I think it fits a little bit. I'm not super, opposed to this card, but I don't know if it necessarily fits. Same with like Second Breakfast. I don't think this is necessarily the strongest card. There's a few sorceries and instants that they're not necessarily powerful, but they are thematic. So we get 2 and a white, so potentially, an instant speed, get to produce a 1/1 soldier token. Up to 2 target creatures each get 2/1 until end of turn, create a food token. So potentially could get 3 alive, create a food token. Instant spell that could potentially turn the fight in a battle, on a defensive battle. So 2/1's not nothing to like, and it's up to 2 target creatures. So I don't know if you can double stack, probably not. But the Hobbit of the Shire were fond of 6 meals a day when they could get them. We get the foil art and stuff of it, iconic from the movie, good to have. Next one, we have Pippin's Bravery. So 1 green. Potentially, you could play 1 green and give a creature 4/4 until end of turn. And then this is also an instant, and you may sacrifice a food. If you do, target creature gets 4/4 until end of turn. Otherwise, that creature gets 2/2 until end of turn. So for 1 mana, you could potentially boost something up 2, which is okay, or you could boost it up 4, which would be pretty good. Or if Aragorn's on the field, you could potentially boost something up 8, which would be really good, especially if you boost up Aragorn, which is already a 5/5. So you could hit somebody for 13 out of nowhere. Pretty good. Pretty good. Could be anyway. But thematically, it fits into the movies. This is when Pippin and Merry fight the orcs in Rohan, probably, before they meet Treebeard. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Next, we have Boromir, Gundur's Hope. So we went with the card draw Boromir. Um, he's 2 mana colors instead of 1. The other one sacrifices itself to protect your board, which is potentially really strong. I would like to have him in here potentially, but this one, you know, 4 mana, 3/4. You're getting to make a 1/1 soldier and scry 2. And then when he enters the battlefield or attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. Reveal a human or artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So if you get him out early, I mean, you're going to at least, I mean, you could potentially get him out. You get a soldier, you get a scry 2, and you get a look at the top 6 cards for a human. So potentially draw 1 here. Not terrible. The other one is still a pretty strong card. I just don't know if he really fits here. And having at least one Boromir, I think, is all right. I don't know. So the other one is Boromir, Warden of the Tower. 3, you get a white mana, 3/3 Vigilance. Whenever opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast a spell, counter that spell, which means he'd be really good at blocking some of Sauron's things, those free mana spells. And then you can sacrifice some creatures you control, getting indestructible until end of turn. The Ring Tempts you. So I'm not opposed to Boromir, Warden of the Tower. I just don't think you get as much benefit from it as you would assume. The other thing is that we did not add any equipments really in the deck, to be honest. A lot of them don't really seem to have that much benefit. We didn't add Forge Anew, which would have fit because we don't really have um, any real equipment that we could add to the deck. If we were, I would. We have Gandalf's sword that we could put in here, which is pretty much only good if you have instant and sorceries in your graveyard, which we might not at some point. But I think you can cast more spells or whatever with it for free when it does damage. And then if we had Aragorn's sword, we could potentially put that in here, but we don't really have room for all that. Aragorn's sword, I think, only makes like spirits or something. Not the best. But Boromir, I think it's going to be good value. We got quite a few humans in the deck and stuff we can search out and put in our hand, as well as artifacts, so not too bad. Next, we got Exotic Orchard, which is one of the precons. Just add 1 mana of any land an opponent could produce. The oldest Rowan trees were planted by the Ents to try and please the Entwives, but they looked at them and smiled and said that they knew where Wither Blossom and richer fruit were growing. Quickbeam. So, pretty interesting. Next, also, I'm happy that I couldn't necessarily fit all the creatures in because the way this deck turned out, very thematically to me, I think I like it. Whereas if I was able to put all the Ents in, I don't think it would necessarily fit the movie. So we can easily put the Ents in like the Elf deck or a Hobbit deck or whatever. But I think if I was just only going to have 2 decks to represent the Lord of the Rings, these 2 are pretty darn close. Um, Especially if I could get these 3, at least 3 Nazgul in there. I think it'd be pretty nice. Next card is Bag End. So you pay 1 life, add a green or a white. So not the best land, but it's all right. And then we can sacrifice Bag End for 1 mana and draw a card. So not terrible. It was popularly believed as local legend that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure. So we got a full art Bag End, which is potentially really good. And then we also have Rogue's Passage, which has like a picture of Bag End as well. So thematically, you could just say like this is Bag End at the beginning of the movie. You sack it because you basically leave it at the very beginning of the game. And then when you come back later, Rogue's Passage is basically, Bag's End, so it's still there. Next is Mirror of Galadriel. So you see in the movie, she kind of used this when she did her speech. You can pay 2 legendary artifact, and you can pay 5 tap and then scry 1, then draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature control. So potentially, I mean, if we have 5 legendary creatures on the field, we can use this for free and just scry 1, draw a card. At the bottom it says your quest stands upon the edge of a knife. Stray but a little and it will fail. To the ruin of all, yet hope remains while all the company is true. So pretty nice, thematic to the movie. I like it. Next is Elrond, Lord of Rivendell. So 2 in a blue. Legendary creature, Elf Noble. So basically, when you play him, you could potentially scry 2 right off the top. When Elrond, Lord of Rivendell, or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can scry 1. So I think the ability is really good. It's part of the reason I had a hard time removing him from the deck, because although it isn't the best in the world, you get a scry every time that you have a creature enter the battlefield. So whatever you're looking for, you could probably find. I mean, you could probably, because anytime you play a white spell, you're potentially scrying 2, you know. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, the ring tempts you. So you could potentially, scry 2. Even when you play him, you can scry 2. Um, Actually, like when you play him, 3 mana, if Aragorn's on the field, you'll scry 2 and scry 1. Yeah. And then if you play another creature, you get the ring tempts you, which is potentially just pretty good. Also, thematically, we don't have very many ring tempt you cards in this deck. So like the Mordor cards, they're very tempted by the ring in general, I think. So it makes sense that they have a lot more tempt cards in our Fellowship deck because you don't really want to be tempted by the ring in the Fellowship. But we have enough to kind of get ourselves 4 stacks if we really wanted. But the first 2 are really all we care about, I think. Um, but this is at the bottom. It says, "This is the hour of the Shire folk when they arise from their quiet fields to shake the towers and councils of the great. Who of the wise could have foreseen it?" So I don't know exactly what this is. I'm assuming that Isengard or the Corsairs or something attacked the halflings in the books, and the halflings probably rose up and fought. But in the movies, it didn't really happen that way, so I don't really care so much about it. But I think he fits in lore-wise. Next is somebody I thought was a halfling, but is actually a human this whole time, and that is Butterbur Bree Innkeeper. So he looks a little bit different. I'm thinking this is the dude from the movie, but I wasn't really sure. But you get 2, a green and a white. So potentially with Aragorn, you're going to get a 1/1 soldier, a 4/4 buff, and then at the beginning of your end step, if you don't control food, you create a food token. So if you have Treebeard on the field, you could potentially every turn get 1/1 counters. If you have the Eagle on the field, every turn you could potentially get another Eagle. If you have the other Hobbit person and you put 1/1 counters on here, you could potentially get um, 1/1 counters from that. If you have the int moot, you could potentially get 3/3/3 ints or whatever with reach. So pretty useful. And it says it's 4 for all those abilities plus a 3/3. I hope you'll be comfortable. You'll be wanting supper. I don't doubt as soon as may be this way now. So I think thematically it's all right. Seems pretty cool. Next is Earthquake. So this is at the beginning or the end of the movie where Sauron's defeated. I think you could potentially use Earthquake in either deck as a destruction card. I think they kind of messed up on the card flavor because here, I mean, it's just destroying every creature without flying, which feels like it would help out Mordor more than anything. Like if the Witch King or something was alive and Mordor died and the earthquake happened, you just kill everything and then Nazgul take over the world. But I think they should have just made this X damage to target player's creatures or something because it says Earthquake deals X damage to each creature without flying and each player. So with Aragorn, you could potentially end the game with this card, which is fine. But in the movie, Gundor and them didn't get affected by this very much. So I don't know. It says, "From far away, now dim, now growing, now mounting to the clouds, there came a dimming rumble, a roar, a long echoing roll of a numerous noise." And also in this deck, we don't have a lot of like the throw the ring in the fire cards or Mount Doom or like anything really rated the Frodo so much. So we have Earthquake, which in my head is going to be basically where Frodo through the ring in the fire and the movie ends. I think thematically that feels right. So you needed one like, and if you're running a Fellowship deck, I think Earthquake works really well. If you're running a Frodo deck, I think uh, throw the ring in the fire, like throwing the ring in the fire, I think works better. But uh, Frodo doesn't have access to red colors, so not really possible to do that. Next card is Smite the Deathless, so 1 in a red, potentially, 2 mana, do 3 damage to an opponent. Smite the Deathless deals 3 damage to target creature. That creature loses indestructible until end of turn. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. And it says, No living man am I. So this is where Merry and Eowyn kill the Witch King, which is pretty good. I don't remember the Witch King's power and toughness. I know his toughness is a little bit lower than his power, though, so maybe this makes sense card-wise as well. Plus, it's a foil. Next is Gandalf the White. So 3 and a white. So you get a 1/1 soldier with this. Flash. You may cast legendary spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. So potentially, when you have Gandalf on the field, you could use your creature spells as like extra abilities. So you could potentially add in a 1/1 soldier, or you could, do 3 damage to an opponent, or you could, namely, if you had green spells and you had Gandalf the White on the field, I would play the green spells to get those 4/4 counters on a defensive block. So it'd be really nice. The other thing is that I think, I mean, Gandalf the White doesn't necessarily fit the best with a lot of the cards in these decks. So, like with Eowyn or something, if you're doing just a normal deck, it's not the best. But I think he fits best with a Fellowship deck with legendary creatures because it says if a legendary permanent or an artifact entering the or leaving the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So if you like the normal precon, you have a bunch of normal soldiers that you can play that would trigger Eowyn shield mating to make soldiers. But if you put Gandalf in there, it wouldn't trigger anything. But with Aragorn, the Uniter, you have Gandalf in, you play a legendary spell that's like blue green, and he's here, and then like okay, so if you have Aragorn on the field, you go to block, and then or you go to attack and he gets unblocked. Like no one blocks him. Okay, he's swinging in for 5. Gandalf the White's on the field, and then you play like a Treebeard, and he comes in. Legendary creature green. Aragorn gets 4/4 for end of turn, goes up to 9/9, and then it would trigger a second time because Treebeard is a legendary creature, which would trigger Aragorn, which would trigger Gandalf, and then you're getting another 4/4, so you're going up to 13/13 for a turn, which is pretty good. And then if you have like a red card come down, you come in, red card comes down, Aragorn triggers 3 damage, Gandalf does 6 damage. So you're getting just more and more bonus benefit. So I almost wish that you could search out Gandalf the White, like Thalia's Lancers or something, get him out early. But basically, if he comes down during the game, it's going to be pretty good for Aragorn. It's basically just doubling the power of your commander, which is really good and also really thematic to the deck, which is why we have Gandalf the Great and Gandalf the White in the deck. Next is the Greyhaven. So this is a really cool foil art thing. Legendary land, and when the Greyhavens enters the battlefield, scry 1, so you get a scry 1 automatically. You can pay to add 1 mana, or you can tap and add 1 mana, or you can tap and add 1 mana of any color among the legendary creature cards in your graveyard. So potentially could be mana fixing later on in the game, but also mana and scry early into the game. So I'm not super opposed with this. The one problem I would say with the mana base in this deck is that there's a lot of legendary lands or something that have like random effects that might not necessarily give you mana ramp. So we might have to try and fix the mana at some point. We will see. The next card is Friendly Rivalry. So this is potentially something that's not super great, but it's also pretty interesting because it's Gimli and Legolas together. So this is basically another card that lets me just kind of act like they're in the deck. or when Grimly and Aragorn like hop over and fight people at Helm's Deep. So red green instant spell. Target creature you control and up to one other target legendary creature you control each deal damage equal to their power to target creature you don't control. So this is a board or a removal spell potentially, which is interesting, but also could have some interesting effects with like Gandalf the White and Aragorn on the field. So let's say you have Aragorn and one of these other ones. It's like a 4/4, or let's say 3/3. Let's say you have a 3/3 legendary and Aragorn. You go into attack, and then people declare their blockers or whatever, and then you play friendly rivalry. So you do 3 damage to an enemy. Then you get to do, and also Aragorn deals the 3 damage. I don't know if it activates commander damage or not, but 3 damage, and then you get a 4/4 buff to one of your persons. So Aragorn becomes like a 4/4, and then Aragorn would be doing. I probably would take the 9 damage. I don't know if it would be 9 or if it would be 5, but you do, let's say 5 damage, you do 9 damage, or you do like 13 damage to a target creature that you're attacking, and then the other one gets destroyed as well. So potentially a pretty strong removal. Or you get to come in for free and they don't block, and you play friendly rivalry, and then just get that 3 damage and that 4/4. So potentially like a 7 damage extra swing from Aragorn. That alone is 12 damage off the top, just getting smacked from Aragorn in one turn, which is pretty big. Pretty darn big. And then if Gandalf is on the field and you can trigger this twice, Aragorn becomes like a 13/13. And, well, yeah, because you get +4, so you'd be a 13/13 and do 6 additional damage. So you're already looking at 19 damage from Aragorn, plus um, destroying a creature, which would be really big. Really big. The only thing that we don't have in this deck so far that probably should be is like a spirit card. So if we had his sword, I think potentially that would be a good add to the deck. And then Lord of the Rings wise, in the movies, I think Gandalf's sword and Aragorn's sword are probably the most iconic. Aragorn's sword would probably be the main one I would add to this deck. Gandalf, we have his sword, but I don't think it's necessarily like highlighted a lot compared to Aragorn's sword. So like if you had Aragorn's sword in the deck, that would potentially take the slot for the spirits, because this when you attack, you get to make spirits. It would also help fill out the deck because we don't have Forge Anew in here because we don't have a bunch of equipments, and I think that one would potentially be a little bit better to have compared to most of the other equipments in the deck because like Frodo's sword, it's important, but it's not like super highlighted in the movie. Gandalf's sword isn't super highlighted in the movie. Grimly's axe or Legolas's bow or anything isn't super highlighted in the movie. But the Sword of the King is a vital part, something that we don't have in the deck yet, something we probably need to get. Actually, I need to Google that real quick because I don't know exactly what it does. I'm pretty sure it makes the ring. I don't know what it's called. Probably just Aragon's sword. Um, Aragorn sword. I see Aragorn cards. Aragorn Company Leader's the one Aragorn card that I wanted in this deck that we didn't get access to, though. That's a 1 green white. Whenever the ring tempts you, if you choose a creature other than Aragorn Company Leaders, your ring bearer, put your choice counters among First Strike, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Life Ring on Aragorn. Whenever more and more creatures on it. Whenever you put one or more counters on Aragorn, put up to one of each of those kind of characters. I mean, I think that's pretty good in general. Um, I think the Fellowship deck, I mean, this could technically just be a movie deck because there are a lot of cards that have to do with ring bearing that I think would work in a fellowship deck if you weren't going to add like ints and all that in here, or if we got rid of a lot of the spells, we could add more like Aragorn Company Leader. It would probably work a little bit better, but anyway. All right, so he has Strider, then Wedding, King of Gondor, the Uniter. The Uniter actually has a lot of different artwork that I wish I could collect. I need to find the equipments though. Equipment, because like we don't have the Elven Sword equipment. I'm not even seeing a post about it on here. Let me look real quick. So they have Dúnedain Blade. Also, like the Lady of Rohan works better with equipment, it seems. Flowering Tree, Forge anew. Hobbit Sting's a creature removal. I don't know if we added Hobbit Sting to this deck or not. If we did, we could replace that with an equipment probably. Um, Lost to Legend, I think works better as an Elven removal spell. Got Reprieve, Second Breakfast, Soldier of the Grey Host. Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of spirit cards I would necessarily care about. War of the Last Alliance could be interesting because you get to search for a legendary creature and put it in your hand. Creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn. I think War of the Last Alliance would be really good for Marchesa deck too, because if you played that for 4 mana and then you get to search and reveal a legendary card from your deck, I mean that's pretty good in general. It's a legendary creature, but you could potentially get some of your most powerful stuff out. Okay, let me look real quick. So, oh god, what do we got here? Rivendell. These are all blue cards. I think I've got most of these cards so far. We got one Rangers card. We don't have Scrolls of Isildur. Trigger artifact as long as you control Scrolls of Isildur. That's interesting. Tap a turn, put some card, draw a card for each tapped creature target opponent controls. I think that's interesting. If I'm in a Gondor deck, I think that Scroll of Isildur would be pretty good. I need to do more research on the Watcher in the Water. Like, is it a Mordor creature? Because, like, I know it attacks the Fellowship, but I mean, it could have just been something that was out there, you know? And also, I think it's something that we haven't got to work very well. I need to replace the Kraken card in the um, Mordor deck, potentially with the Watcher in the Water. Bitter Downfall. Where's all the equipments at? Most of these we have. Oath of the Grey Host. Each target opponent creates a food token. Yeah, there's a few cards we don't have, but Shelob's Ambush. Interesting. Witch King. Ymir, Marshal of Rohan. Whenever one or more other attacking legendary creature controls die, untap all creatures you control. I think so. Ymir, Marshal of Rohan would be a better card to have in this deck here. Potentially. I mean, I don't know if it's better than the one that we have, but the fact that if a legendary creature you control dies, Display of Power. Copy any number of target instant and/or sorcery spells. You may choose new targets. That's probably something from the movie or from the books, because I don't remember Gandalf being on the mountain fighting stuff with those guys. Um, I would say Marshal of Rohan would fit probably a Rohan deck a little bit better, if I was going to be honest. You play your commander and your commander dies, or like Eowyn dies and you get an extra combat. And considering a lot of the Rohan cards are giving extra stuff anyway. Alright, so there's Grimly's Axe. There's quite a few cards in this set. I think we have like 99% of the cards, though. We don't have there and back again. I think there and back again would be really good, but that'd be for a dwarf deck. Whereas like Sailborn the Rise would be for an elf deck for sure. Let's see. Galadriel Bow. That's alright. It's not terrible. Legolas. You got many partings. Radagast. Where the heck are all the artifacts? Doors of Durin. We don't have that one. Whenever you attack Scry 2, then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it on the battlefield tapped and attacking. If you control a dwarf, and hexproof if you control an elf. Interesting. Ooh, the normal Flame of Anor art is awesome. I like that. Where? Alright, there we go. Andriel, Flame of the West. 3 cost equipment. Equipped creature, it's 3/1. So on Aragorn, he'd be a 8/6. Whenever equipped creature attacks, create 2 tapped 1/1 flying or white spirit tokens with flying. That creature is a legendary. Instead, create 2 of those tokens that are tapped and attacking. So with him, you're going to get basically 10 damage if he has the sword. And then you have Borrow Blade, which isn't a legendary equipment, so it probably wouldn't be worth it. Int Drought Basin just kind of sucks in general, in my mind. Glamdring is the equipment that we have. First strike and gets 1/0 for each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your hand with mana value less than or equal to the damage without paying its mana cost. I don't know if Glamdring would be good in this deck in general because a lot of our instant or sorcery cards are kind of like these buff cards and stuff. Like if you had a bunch of red, like you had like Gandalf the Grey or something, you had a bunch of like red and green or like red and white or something, it might be good. I just don't think that's worth it. And then Amdriel Flame of the West. I mean, I could see adding that to this deck just for thematically, for Aragorn. The 3/1 is okay, but like, it's not something that would be like, because like, if you had it in the deck, it'd be like you would play it, and then any creature would just be holding it. And you'd slowly make an army. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it'd necessarily be worth it. And you wouldn't need Forge Anew for it because it'd just be like, um, it's like 2 to equip it. It's not that big of a deal. And then Samwise could bring it back. We have Horn of the Mark and Horn of Gondor in here. We have the Mirror of Galadriel. We didn't put Mithril Coat in here because this deck isn't Frodo based. If Frodo was our commander, I would put Mithril Coat in there for thematic stuff. We didn't put the One Ring in here. We did the Inherited Envelope because the One Ring is okay, but I don't think it's super crazy. We could put it in here, but I don't think we necessarily need the card draw with how much stuff that we have in here. But if we did a Hobbit deck, potentially we would need it, maybe. Let's see. Ordinac. Target opponent may have you draw a card. If that player doesn't, you mill X cards where X is the number of fluence counters. And that player loses life equal to the total mana value of those. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, that's a strong card. File of Galadriel could be something we stick in here. If you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand, draw 2 cards instead. If you would gain life while you have 5 or less life, you gain twice that much life instead. It's not bad. I mean, it's a mana rock for 3. So if you have no cards and you would draw a card, you get 2, which isn't terrible. And you gain life while you have 5 or less life, you gain twice that much. So if you had 5 life and you ate a food token, you get 6 life instead, which is beneficial. I mean, if you had 1, it would give you 6. I don't know. If I had File of Galadriel, I'd probably replace that mana rock that's in the deck with that, even if it's less efficient. And then if I had the Flame of the West, I would probably stick it in there just for thematic stuff. Replace that card. Shire Scarecrow, I don't think matters. Sting Glinting Dagger. Untap equipped creature. I don't think that matters either. So mainly just, I mean, Gandalf's thing I think could work, but I don't think it would be the best. Look at the Nazgul art. So we have like 3 of them. They're not bad. The Ring Wraith card. I need to figure out how to add those to the Mordor deck, potentially. Gandalf the White Rider, so we have that one in the starter decks. We also have Frodo Determined Hero. You attach target equipment you control with mana 2 or 3 to Frodo. Yeah, I think Determined Hero is potentially a pretty good card. Aragorn and Arwen Wed is okay. White Rider, whenever you cast a spell, creatures you control get 1/0 until end of turn and scry 1. When Gandalf the White Rider dies, you may put it into its owner's library 5th from the top. Yeah, if I didn't have Gandalf the White in here, I'd probably put Gandalf White Rider, but since it scries and it gives, and when you cast a spell in general, it gives you 1/0 to your creatures. I'd probably save it for a Gandalf deck or a Frodo deck. I think White Rider probably fits more with the Frodo deck. Gandalf the White's just a little bit more powerful. Witch King of Ruin. Fires of Mount Doom. I would say that we have most of the cards in general. We just don't have all the card art. Like the ring art is pretty cool for some of these. Yeah, okay, they do have a Minas Tirith card. I thought I had one of these too. Pay 2, draw a card. Only if you attacked with. I mean, that's fine. It's an okay. I think I prefer Castle Ardenville instead, but Minas Tirith. I mean, it's card draw. It wouldn't be terrible. Just trying to look. Saruman's Ransom. Shelob, Child of Ungoliant. So that's the same colors of yeah, same colors as Gollum. I think if you like, you should put Gollum as the commander of your spider deck. I think 6-drop Spider Demon, Death Touch Ward 2. Other spiders you control have Death Touch and Ward 2. Whenever another creature dealt damage this turn by a spider you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a food artifact. with 2 tap, sacrifice this artifact, you gain 3 life and it loses all other card types. I don't know if that means it's still a creature or not. I doubt it. Elvish Mariner is a card we don't have, I don't think. But we don't have the elf deck yet, so there's a lot of stuff that we probably don't have because we don't have the elf deck, like Galadriel Gift Giver. Sackville Baggins, Wizard Rockets. Huh. I like those full art cards. That's what I'm saying. We should have bought those scene boxes that had all the scenes. Like Freya of Orcs are in here. Last March of the Ents. Saruman of Many Colors is in there. Sting the Glinting Dagger is in there with Aragon Company Hero. Flame of Venors with the Balrog of Durindane. Interesting. You got a Minas Tirith with Mirkwood Bats and Vrish's Fellbeast. So that's when Mordor attacks them. And you have the Witch King of Agmar behind there with Shadow of the Enemy and Borodur behind that. And you got Elephants with Rising of Day. Morgul Lieutenant is in there. Interesting. And Eowyn Fearless Knight. You got Prince Imrahil, I think, is a part of this as well. Knights of Orcish Bowmasters. Interesting. Okay, Gandalf the White is a part of the Shire thing. Or no, it's a part of the Grey Havens. Oh. Very interesting. Well, now we know. So we got a couple of cards potentially I would want. We could add those 3 equipments and stuff. All right, next card we have is Bilbo's Ring. So instead of the 1 ring, we have Bilbo's Ring in here. The 1 ring is good, but I don't know if we have enough life gain to necessarily benefit from it. And this, I think, might potentially be better. I'm not sure. I think the draw power of the 1 ring could make it really good, but it's just every turn you're going to be taking damage, and in Commander it's probably not as big of a deal, but online on the arena, every time we were using it, we're getting like 5 life damage each turn, and then we couldn't use it anymore, and it kind of is a problem because you can't get rid of it very easily without exiling it, and I don't know, it's just a thing. So Bilbo's Ring, as long as it's your turn, equipped creature has hexproof and can't be blocked, and then whenever equipped creature attacks alone, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So here, I mean, you're losing life, but you're getting 1 card off of it each time, and it equips to a halfling, pretty cheap. Goes with the storyline. The 1 ring, I mean, you get that 1 turn of protection, which is really nice, but I just don't know if it's worth it. Whereas like this one, you're going to be unblockable for a turn and get 1 card draw, so I don't know. And then Entish Restoration, so 2 and a green, so you could potentially use this to get 4/4 to one of your creatures. And then you sack a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. If you control a creature with 4 or greater, instead search your library for up to 3 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We also have, if we wanted to replace another forest, we could put in the Entish Forest card, but all it does is turn every land into a forest as well. So you don't really get mana from it. It just kind of mana fixes your stuff, and I don't know if it's worth it to put in there. Next, we have Terramorphic Expanse, which is okay. Basically, we have 2 sack lands in here. Well, technically 3 sack lands that can search out other lands to kind of thin the deck. So yeah, just search a library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. The earth groaned and quakened, the towers of Toa swayed, Toldor fell down, the mighty rampart crumbled, and the black gate was hurled into ruin. So pretty good. Next is a card that we added from outside the set because it kind of worked in with the deck pretty good, and that is Recruit the Worthy. A card that I really like that most people hate, mainly because a lot of people that play mono white really hate cards that aren't mana efficient, and paying like 4 mana for a 1/1 soldier everyone thinks is terrible, and it is, but also if you fix your mana issues in a mono white deck, this can be a really good card because a lot of mono white cards in general, you have to pay like 4 mana to make a 1/1 soldier. But the benefit is, if you're making soldiers with cards like this, they can't just wipe the board and get rid of your token generation. Or they have to have something that exiles like enchantments, artifacts, or interrupts spells. So you're getting 4 mana, but you're also not losing your generation source. So as long as you have mana, you're good. And if you focus on your mana gen, things like this become really powerful really quick. So basically, you can pay 1 for a 1/1 white soldier creature token, and then you can buy back for 3 to put it back in your hand. And then for it says at the bottom, for peace of mind, they mustered for war. So the artwork looks sort of similar to something Gundor might have, and the card wordage kind of fits Lord of the Rings, but also with Recruit the Worthy here, you're paying 4 to make a 1/1 white soldier creature token, and if Aragorn's on the field, you're paying 4 to get that and a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So you're getting 4 mana for 2 soldiers every single turn, or more, because if you have like 12 mana, you can use this 3 times and get 3 soldier tokens. So I mean, really powerful effect compared to most things. Next, we have Birthday Escape. So this is from the beginning of the movie. So 1 blue, which could potentially let us scry 2, and then we get a draw card, and in the ring Timshu. And this is as Bilbo finished his speech, he slipped the ring on his finger, and he was never seen by any hobbit in Hobbiton again. So that's pretty good, and I think it's pretty interesting. I like it more than Slip on the Ring. So, because potentially you could put Slip on the Ring here instead of the Birthday Escape, and it would fit both Bilbo and Frodo's kind of thing. So you could use that instead. And then if you had Bilbo and you put Slip on the Ring in, it would make him disappear and then reappear again. So you would instantly get 3 stacks of the Ring Timshu, which would make him really strong. But this one in general, just being able to draw a card, I think is pretty good. So I'm not super opposed to it. Next is Galadriel of Lothlorien. We have a better card art of this, but I really like the foil of this card. We have the full art card of this, though. But 1 green-blue, so you could potentially give your creature 4/4 and scry 2. And then when the ring tempts you, if you choose a creature other than Galadriel of Lothlorien as your ring bearer, scry 3. So whenever you scry and reveal the top card of your library, if it's a land is revealed this way, you put on the battlefield tap. So potentially you get some mana ramp out of this. When the ring tempts you, which we have a few cards that do it, you can get scry 3. So if Lord of Rivendell is in here, I believe. I don't know. That's when 2 creatures enter the battlefield. He scries, and then when you scry, the ring tempts you, and then the ring tempts you would proc her, which will make you scry 3. Um, and then you could potentially play lands off the top of your deck. Actually, it's just if it's revealed this way. Whenever you scry, you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, is revealed this way, put it on the battlefield tap. So that alone is a massive ability that could boost up your deck really good. And then at the bottom it says, I will pass the test. I will diminish and go into the west and remain Galadriel. And we got some really nice card art foil there. I like it. Next, we have just another island. This is the second island foil river thing that we have. So that's okay. The next thing we have is Many Partings. I thought this was from the first of the movie, but I guess it's from the last of the movie. I think it fits either way. It's going in the deck, so whatever. Just one green for a many parting sorcery. If Gandalf or something's out there, this can pump something up by 8. Just playing it by itself, you could pump up your creature by 4 for a turn, so that alone is pretty good. And you search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle, and then you get to create a food token. So the big thing is that you pay 1, potentially increase your creatures by 4 for or one creature by 4 for a turn, potentially search out a land that you need, potentially create a food token for 3 health that could potentially make you another eagle or give you some 1/1 counters or give you some life. So a lot of these cards have a lot of flexibility because the commander. Next is Delightful Halfling. So this is the birthday party at the beginning of the movie. Also one green. So playing this, you can buff up a creature by 4. So alone, that's pretty good. And then it's a Halfling Citizen. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, and then or 1 mana of a color, or you can tap it and add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and it can't be countered. So this works for your commander and all your other creatures that are very important, as well as mana fixing, as well as being a creature and also a 4/4 buff card. Pretty good. Next we have Rogue's Passage. So this is another Bilbo thing, basically. Tap, add a mana, or pay 4. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. It says, I am leaving for somewhere I can finish my book. Perhaps I have thought of a nice ending for it. And he lived happily ever after to the end of his days, Bilbo. So you remember that from the first of the movie as well. So that's pretty good. Then we have the Inn of the Prancing Pony. So you remember this from the first of the movie as well. Tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a multicolored spell. So not necessarily the best land in the deck, but there's a lot of things that we can use this on because we have a lot of multicolor. Mainly the commander as well, though. And then at the bottom it says, the road goes on, or ever on and on. Down from the door where it began, now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, Frodo's song. So we got a full art, Inn of the Prancing Pony. Next, we got Frodo Baggins, green white. This is something that we probably need to get a different card art for because I don't necessarily like this one, but I didn't see any other ones that we had. So for right now, it's what we got. But whenever Frodo Baggins or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under control, the ring tempts you. As long as Frodo is your ring bearer, it must be blocked if able. So decent card. Potentially a good source of ring tempts you early game or late game. And then potentially, a creature removal, it has to be blocked. I don't necessarily think it's the best card in the world, but it's a 1/3, and if it's the ring bearer, basically things with bigger power isn't going to be able to block it. And then a smaller creature token that has 1 power, this is going to be able to kill. And then if it has, you attack with multiple creatures, then the other guys are going to be able to get through. So that's pretty good. Next card is Shadowfax, Lord of Horses. So 3 red, white. Um, Interesting enough, this can't go in the Gandalf Wonder Westward Voyager deck. But horses you control have haste, so it shows you the meaning of haste. And whenever Shadowfax, Lord of Horses, attacks, you may put a creature card with lesser power from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So anything lesser than a 4/4 you could potentially put down from your hand, which there is quite a few things that we could do. Not everything in the deck we can do that with. But also, if we manage to buff this card to like a 5/5 or 6/6 or whatever, you're going to be able to get pretty much any card that you want out of your hand every time this attacks. So if you buff this up, you can get really good value, as well as a 5-drop 4/4 that also does 3 damage to an opponent and makes an additional creature. So you're getting 5 damage for 5 mana and 3 additional damage on a creature with the potential of um, summoning things from your hand every time it attacks. So it's pretty good. Then we got Rosie Cotton from Southland. This isn't necessarily from the movie, but Rosie is shown in the movie at the very beginning, and it has some benefits. So you could cut this, but I think also we need to kind of have a Rosie in here at some point. I don't think she really fights in the movie, but it's whatever. 2 and a white, so I mean 3 for basically 2 power if you get the extra soldier. And then when it enters the battlefield, you create a food token. So, you at least get 3 additional life off this that can have those additional effects if you let the food token sit there for a while. And then whenever you create a token, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosie. So when she comes in, if you have Aragorn, you can put a 1/1 counter on him or the soldier token. But it's also whenever you create a token, it puts a 1/1 counter. So she's a buff card. So basically, when she comes down, if Aragorn is out, you are going to make a food token and the soldier token, and then you're going to get two 1/1 counters you can put on Aragorn, which make him a 7/7, or you can put two 1/1 counters on the soldier token and make him a 3/3. And then, anytime you make a token, every time you cast a white spell, you're going to get an additional 1/1 counter. So you can make all of your tokens 2/2s, or you could just buff up one creature really big. So, interesting card. I think it deserves to be in there just to kind of have a rosy thing. So, whenever Sam and Frodo talk about, you know, lady halflings, they can like have a Rosie in there for Dill. Next is Gandalf Sanction. I think this is the movie, but I don't fully remember. It's a 3, 1 blue, red, so you're going to do 3 damage to an enemy, as well as scry 2 for 3 mana. And then Gandalf Sanction deals X damage to target creature, where X is the number of instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard. Excess damage is dealt to the creature's controller instead. And then at the bottom it says, there was a crack and the staff split asunder in Saruman's hands, and the head of it fell down at Gandalf's feet. So, pretty interesting card. Early, it isn't going to do a whole lot unless you're blowing up something really small. But if you get this like early game, you could potentially remove like something pretty big, as well as do like 3 damage and scry 2. And then later game, if you have like quite a few instant and sorceries in your graveyard, I mean, you could do like, 5, 10 damage or something like to a creature, and then do like, I don't know, like 4 damage to your opponent, and then do 3 more because it has red in its name. So pretty big chunk of life that you could take from an enemy, maybe. Next is the only bird that we put in the deck because we needed to conserve room, and this was the best bird that we had. So it's Garwithir, Greatest of the Eagles. So you get 4 and a white. Potentially get a 1/1 soldier, so that's okay. Flying, and then whenever Garwithir attacks, target attacking creature gains flying till end of turn. So this is a good way to get flying on an important creature like Aragorn or something that needs to smack in for some final damage. And at the beginning of each end step, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, create a 3/3 white bird creature token with flying, and whenever this creature attacks, target attacking creature gains flying till end of turn. So basically, the idea is that the food tokens that we make throughout the game, we either conserve them or we're slowly using them over time to resurrect stuff or whatever. And then when we have a card that comes down that gets a benefit from gaining life or food token, we use them. And then with this one in particular, it's a 5/5 flyer, but we could crack a food token, gain 3 life, and then make an additional 3/3 flyer, which isn't necessarily going to beat the Nazgul, but it gives our creatures flying. So they have to decide between our big creatures or these eagles. And this is basically replacing the eagle cards for getting Frodo and them off of a mountain at the end of the game. So Lord of Eagles is going to be our eagle card, getting them off that mountaintop as well as helping us in combat. Then we got Shire Terrace. So this is another search land. You can just leave it as it is, tap, add 1 mana. So if you have another one of those sack cards, you can just put this one down, use it, get a sack card, bring out your land, and then save this one for later. So you can pay 1, sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put it in the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So I think this is a pretty good land to have if you don't have a lot of deck thinning in some of your early decks. So potentially now you can have like three cards or whatever in like a mono white deck or something to find out of planes. But it says everything looked fresh and new green of spring was shimmering in the fields. Pretty good. Next we have Faramir, Prince of Ithilien. So this is uh I would like to say this is when he had Frodo and them underneath the waterfall, because that's what the artwork says. I don't necessarily like this artwork compared to the other ones. It's a human noble, 4 drop for 3/3. So potentially, if Aragorn's on the field, you get a, you know, 1/1 soldier, so you get 4 power for 4 mana, and you get a scry 2. And then at the beginning of your end step, choose an opponent. At the beginning of that player's next end step, you draw a card if they didn't attack you. Otherwise, you create 3 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens. So potentially a pretty strong token generator as well as potential card draw. I'm not opposed to it, and it's a human noble. Think there's more humans than anything in the deck. So if you do this, you'd either go human or you go noble, but I think human probably be the best. Next is Rivendell. So Rivendell enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature, which we have quite a few of those. And you tap to add a blue, or you can pay 2, tap, scry 2, only activate only if you control a legendary creature. So pretty good. good for scries and stuff. There's actually a lot of scrying in this deck, um, which is a mechanic I don't use very often, but I know how powerful it can be if you use it a lot. It's very potent being able to find cards that you need if you have the mana for it. All right, next card, Horde of the Mark. Horn of the Mark. This actually replaced the horn that was in the deck originally. I think the original horn was something along the lines of you a creature or something came out. I think you got to search like so many cards for like a human creature or something. But this one's 2-drop legendary artifact. Whenever 2 or more creatures you control attack a player, look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a creature card from among them, and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. And at the bottom, he that blows his horn shall set fear in the hearts of his enemies and joy in the hearts of his friends. Eowyn. So we have the Horn of Gondor and we have the Horn of Rohan, basically. Where the other one is, I don't remember what that horn is, but it's kind of crappy. So this is pretty good. I think it's better. Basically, just when you attack, you look at top 5, and then any creature, not just humans, you can put in your hand. Which is better in this deck, I think, than putting it on the battlefield because it means you get to play it and then get the proc from Aragorn the Uniter's effect. So there's a lot more versatility there. As well as if someone blows it up, I mean, it's good, but I'm not going to be super sad about it. And then if it stays there, I mean, if I have a couple tokens on the field, I can just attack and then try to find a creature to put on the field. Now we got the Mirkwood Forest Mapland. I think that's pretty good. Then we have Tranquil Cove. So this is white-blue. Enters the battlefield tapped and you gain 1 life. In the south, the realm of Gondor long endured and for a while its splendor grew. Its people building high towers and havens for many ships. Okay. Next is Eowyn Shieldmaiden. Potentially, I almost cut this for Eowyn Fearless Knight. My reasoning on why I kept this instead of Eowyn Fearless Knight, one is in the movies, Eowyn isn't necessarily fearless, I don't think. I think she's plenty scared. So I think Eowyn Fearless Knight would probably come after um, the Lord of the Rings movie when she makes Éomer King of Rohan. So I think if you made a Rohan deck, those two together would be really good. Whereas the Shield Maiden is more of the Lord of the Rings card. But this is a 6-drop blue, red, white. So if you do play this, it's a 5/4, 3 damage to an opponent potentially, as well as a 1/1 soldier, and 3 damage to an opponent. And it has first strike. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if another human entered the battlefield under your control this turn, create 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. Then if you control 6 or more humans, draw cards. So let's say Aragorn is on the field and you play Eowyn Shieldmaiden. You get to scry 2, potentially looking for another creature card or something. Then you get to do 3 damage to an opponent. And then you get a white human soldier creature token. So then you go to combat, and since that soldier token entered the battlefield, you will now get 2 red human knight creature tokens with haste and trample. And so that is going to be 3 creatures coming from this creature. So that's an additional 5 power. So that's 10 power off this card, plus the 2 scry and 3 damage off of something. And potentially you could swing in for 4 on the turn she comes in. And then the next turn you could swing in for like 10. But also, if you have Aragorn and her, that's already 2. And then you have 2 knights and a soldier. So you're already setting at 5, so you need 1 more, and then you get to draw a card. So if you have a soldier token and Aragorn, and then you play her, you're getting those 2 knights as well as a card, which is pretty good, and the damage, and the token, and the scry 2, which is pretty good. Um, yeah, but her ability, I mean, it's just you play a spell that's white, and you get 2 knight tokens and draw a card. Pretty solid. I think it fits pretty well. Next, we have the Plains, the Shire Plains map card foil. So that's pretty good. I like it. And then we have Wingscarred Crag. Tap, and you gain 1 life. And at the bottom, about that stream and on the side of the great river lies Rohan, Celeborn. So that's pretty good. I think Celeborn is the elf that came to the Battle of Helm's Deep to help Aragorn. So I would either make a deck fully around him, or I would make an elf deck with him being a part of it. I think his ability is pretty good though. Like whenever an elf attacks, you get a scry. So if you have a bunch of elves, you could potentially scry a lot in that deck. Next card is Blasphemous Act. We actually took this out of the Mordor deck. Um, there's a couple things on that. It's because I don't think that the art, or I don't think that the card itself necessarily fits the Mordor deck and Evil Side. Basically 9 mana, spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, which with Mordor, you're making orc army tokens. It doesn't really go wide. And then on top of that, it's dealing 13 damage to each creature. So potentially Mordor could use this and their creature token could be alive still, which would be good. But on the other hand, at the bottom, I mean, this is a board wipe. It would remove more like your commander and everything else on the Mordor side. You just don't have any way to protect against it. And then it's at the bottom it says, and there are some things, of course, whose side I am altogether not on. These Burum, these orcs, and their masters, Treebeard. So the artwork is the orcs killing the trees. So you could say that the board wipe fits the evil side because it's them destroying all the forests and stuff, which would be good. But movie thematic wise, they were killing the Ents, but the Ents rallied and just ran them over. So I think this fits better in with the Fellowship deck because if Mordor is really popping off and we don't have enough creatures to defend against it, since we're mainly going wide and we have temporary buffs, we need more board wipes. And in my vision, this is basically Blasphemous Act is Treebeard gathering his forces and destroying Mordor and or destroying Isengard and stuff. So you're basically wiping out their whole force and taking them out of the fight, which I think is how this fits into the deck pretty well. The next card is the Reflecting Pool, Henneth Anun. So add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. And then it says, this is the window of the sunset, fairest of all the lands, falls of Ithilien, land of many fountains, Faramir. So I think this is the waterfall that he was at when uh, Frodo and them showed up, maybe. And then we have Merry Esquire of Rohan, so you get 1 in a red. And then it gets haste 2/2. When Esquire of Rohan has first strike as long as it's equipped, but we don't really have any equipments. And then whenever you attack with Merry and another legendary creature, draw a card. So if you have a Rohan deck, this would probably be pretty good in that deck if you had equipments for it. But in this deck, it is basically, you get a 1/1 soldier, you get a 3 damage to an opponent, and it has haste. And then you get a swing in with another legendary creature, and you draw a card. So potentially, it's basically just pay 2, get a token, draw a card. And then if it survives, you get to draw an additional card the next turn potentially. So pay 2, draw 2, and make a token. Not bad. And at the bottom, then suddenly Mary felt it at last, beyond doubt, a change. Wind was in his face. And it got pretty decent artwork as well. So I'm not opposed to that. And then we got the final island river that we had. So all in all, that is probably a really solid deck for the most part. I think Martial Anthem potentially would go in there pretty well. Press the enemy is okay, but I don't really know if it'd be worth it or not. Basically, if you use Press the Enemy in the deck, you get a counter one of their spells, then you get to scry 2, and then you could cast another spell from your hand potentially and get those benefits. But it's their turn, and I don't think you would get much from it. So I don't know. I think the Bath Song is potentially like Martial's Anthem or the Bath Song would be the best. It's a Bath Song, you get to draw 2 cards and discard a card twice, and then you get to shuffle cards from your graveyard into your library, so you can reuse those spells, cycle all those stuff back. So I think that's probably the best. Otherwise, I think the Sword of Aragorn would be the top card that you would want, just because it would be more thematic, and also getting to produce flying spirit tokens. I think would be pretty good because we don't have any undead soldiers in here yet. There's one card that exiles an opponent graveyard and it gets 1/1 for each card or something that I think would work very well. But other than that, I'm not super crazy. Like there's not any super powerful spirits. You can't use the king of the spirits in this deck because it has black. So it's like if you're gonna do a spirit deck, you either have to use the spirit commander guy as your leader or you have to do Denethor. So I guess thematically it kind of fits because the spirit guys betrayed their oath, so they're kind of like they're humans, but they're kind of scummy, and so it kind of would fit more with Denethor potentially. But I don't think their decks really fit the best together. Like Denethor's like if a creature you control dies, you create a soldier token, and then you can like sack a soldier or something and draw a card. So you're basically just killing off one of your things to draw a card each turn. And then like Faramir Field Commander has like a similar ability where it's like if a creature died this turn, you get to draw a card. So I think what they would want you to do is probably run either the Spirit or Denethor as your main commander. I think the Spirit's effect is um, whenever it's the target of an ability or something an enemy controls or you control, it like it like phases out and then phases back in. And I think when something phases in, it creates more spirit tokens, which basically would be a flicker deck just like the Rohan deck potentially. Um, so you just flicker them in and out of the game, which would be good. If he could go in the Aragorn deck, then you could just target him every time with Aragorn's ability and just use him to make spirit tokens, which would be very thematic. Um, but we just don't have the colors for it. Now, in that deck, I would think maybe Denethor would be the main commander because he costs like 2 less. And then you could put the spirit guy as like a secondary commander because he's harder to get rid of in that deck. And then the flicker spells would be able to protect Denethor, but then you could also use it to produce tokens from the spirit. And then basically, let me find this thing real quick. So, Lord of the Rings, Denethor, Stewart of Gondor. God. I don't know why you can't find the cards that you want. They just don't have access to them. Frodo's Bane. Mm. Dude, my Gundor deck is gonna be absurd though when we get access to it. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Like, it can be like Faramir, Steward of Gondor or whatever, as the commander, and this Pillow Fort with all of the Gondor cards and all the Pillow Fort cards that I can get my hands on. No one's gonna be able to attack you. It's gonna be glorious. So we got multi. Alright, so Denethor, Rolling Stewart. So it's a 3-drop. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, you create a soldier or a white human soldier creature token. Then you pay 2, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life and you gain a life. So not card draw like I thought it was, but basically you could use it as a sack outlet. But if something dies, you get to make a soldier creature token. The pay 2 is basically if you have like a bunch of mana and a bunch of soldiers, you could just sit there and recycle them over and over again. Let me find the spirit guy real quick. I think Garanweir the Windlord could potentially be a decent card as well. Okay. So King of the Oathbreakers, 4. So you get 2 and a white black. When him or another spirit you control becomes the target of a spell, it phases out. Whenever King of the Oathbreakers or another spirit you control phases in, create a tapped 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So I'm not super crazy about it. I mean, if your opponent targets it, it's just not going to be able to block. Like, basically, they could target one of your things and just make it disappear, and you wouldn't be able to block with it. And then when it comes in, it's summoning a tapped spirit, so you can't block with it, and you can't attack with it. And it's only one spirit. Yeah, so it's not the best in the world, you know. And then if what else would you do with it? I mean, if Denethor is your commander and that comes out, and you have things to target it every single turn, you could potentially make one spirit, and then if your spirit dies, you can make one soldier. You know, but it's only one creature every time something dies, so I just don't think the deck would be very strong. Compared to like Faramir, Steward of Gundor, being able to just like draw a card each turn or make 3 soldiers, I think that would be way stronger potentially than anything else that you could summon on. What is that? What? Oh, this is an island we took out. Okay. The biggest thing with this deck, I would say, is that I don't know about the mana that's in here. If that's what you'd want, these mana cards. But I think if we can find somebody that has the sword for Aragorn, I would try to stick that in here, potentially. Gandalf's sword, I don't really care about necessarily. I think the spirits would be pretty good for this deck, even though they're spirit tokens. They don't go with the theme at all, but they are flyers. It's 2 spirits per attack. So I think that would be, if I was going to replace a spell in this deck, it's probably going to be that, if I was to guess. Let's see, we get Shire, Limbus, Samwise, mm, Gandalf. I don't even remember what that card was I said that I would try to remove. I know one of them was like a mana, like this command tower or something we could swap out for yeah, we get the light, the elf's light thing, and if we do get Gracious Host, Horses of Bruin, Supreme Verdict, Eowyn, Stone Seer. I'm not seeing the card that I recall. Throne of the High City. Might have been ring like Windbrisk Heights, maybe. That's what we did. Or Thought Vessel. I know there was something I was saying that I could have taken out. I don't think it's Intis Restoration. It might have been like a Terramorphic Expanse. Recruit the Worthy, maybe. Or maybe it was an additional land. Because, like, if I do the The Elven Artifact, I'd replace a Mana Rock that's in here for it. If I do the Sword, it'd probably be an additional land removed. Maybe. Hard to say. But good news is we get to test this out tomorrow. So that's something. But I also think this deck has most, if not all, the things from the movies that you would want, as well as a couple of additional little flavor cards that are really nice. I'm not super opposed to anything that's in here. These other cards I'm going to leave here tomorrow. Make some room in this pack for sure. But I think this deck is going to be a little bit better than it was before. Like, I think the King of Gondor, Aragorn, King of Gondor, probably would have been a better commander than the Shield Maiden for sure. Because he's like 4 mana, and then you become the Monarch. And you get like some free attacks in, which is kind of interesting. Aragorn the Uniter is still 4 mana, but it's 4 colors, so we might have problems getting him out early. I don't really know. Because if we have problems getting the colors that we need to get him out on turn 4 every turn, we're going to have problems. But also movie-wise, I mean, we don't have an additional Aragorn in here, so we can't really say we'd summon him. If you're going for the movie-wise, you would want him out early. Like, you'd want, like, ideally, you'd want, like, Bilbo out, like, turn 1 or turn 2. And then Frodo and Sam. And then Aragorn, like, Gandalf and stuff. But yeah, tomorrow, that is the deck we're going to be playing. And hopefully it goes all right. I'm going to try and do some other stuff as well. But we still have these end cards in here that we could use for an Ent deck. Celeborn the Wise, the Lothlorians, Dúnedain Rangers. Like, there's a lot of elf cards that are mono green in here that would be really good. We got like Revive the Shire and all kinds of stuff you could potentially use for all of this. And some of these things like Glorious Gale and stuff, it kind of works, but I think it works better in an Elven deck than the Fellowship deck. Like Rising of the Day could potentially work in the Fellowship deck as a game-ending card, but it's also like a Rohan card. And we do have one Glamdring, but its equipped creature deals combat damage to a player. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to the damage that was dealt. I don't know if it's worthwhile, you know. And then you got Hilithian Knots or Rangers of Ithilien, which I think would fit better in like a Gondor deck. We have the 2 talismans that we took out that potentially we need to add back in at some point for mana fixing. Oath of Errol is pretty good. Makes you the Monarch, gives you creature indestructible, as well as 4 tokens. So, I mean, and Lognar Captain would be pretty good. We have the 1 ring card that could be good. The Crown of Gondor we took out would have been really good. Shared Animosity, Mithril Coat, Banished from Edoras, Eastward Farther. Fealty to the Realm is one that I really wanted to keep in here as well. But I think this is going to fit more in just a plain Gondor deck. But basically, in his battlefield, you become the Monarch. The Monarch controls enchanted creature. And then I think that's, you know, pretty interesting to have in general if you're going to do that. I have Commander Sphere and stuff we took out of here. Took out Door of Destinies, took out Vanquisher's Banner. Took out Visions of Glory and Increasing Devotions. Took out Inherited Envelope, which potentially would have been really good. I'm going to set that down real quick. Took out Weathered Wayfarer, Wayfarer's Bauble. Herald's Horn was the other one we took out. So, creatures of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. Upkeep, top card of your library. If it's a creature of the chosen type, you reveal it and put it in your hand. It's okay. They have Faramir, Aramir, Boromir. Dúnedain Protector, I think, would be really good, but I think it's going to go in an elf deck potentially. But it would work really good in everything, even like a Rohan deck. Unbreakable Formation we removed. It's pretty good, but and it also has the Ghost Spirits on it, so I think it would have been really nice to have that. Um, you get Vigilance, you get +1/+1 counters. And they get Indestructible. Frontline Medic we took out. Verge Rainers we took out. Grey Host Reinforcements we took out. Selfless Squire we took out. Humble Defector we took out. Bastion Protector we took out. Flame Rush Rider took out. Sunset Revelry took out. Taunt from the Rent Hearts, look out. Lost the Legend was taken out. Palest Jailer was taken out. Harsh Mentor was taken out. Fiend Hunter taken out. Archivist of Gundor taken out. Dearly Departed taken out. Frontline Warmonger taken out. Combat Celebrant taken out. Village Bellringer taken out. Potentially useful card, potentially. Merry Warden of Isengard. We didn't have the other one, but this one is like whenever one or more artifacts enter the battlefield under control, you create a 1/1 White Soldier creature token with lifelink, and it triggers only once each turn. But if you're making food tokens, this could be potentially a really good card because it's going to give you lifelink and stuff. And I wouldn't mind having that in the deck, but I don't know. Warden of Isengard, I don't really know about all that. Now, Inherited Envelope. We might be able to replace a mana rock with this. 3 cost, add 1 mana of any color, and it tempts you. So it's worthwhile to look if we would replace this. I'm sure I had it in there and taken it out for some reason. So let's look for the mana rock real quick just to see what we got. Arcane Signet is what it is. So if we replaced Arcane Signet with Inherited Envelope, I think the envelope potentially is more thematic than Arcane Signet, even though the text on Arcane Signet is, well, actually no, the Arcane Signet is when Gandalf sealed the ring in the envelope. Okay, let's see if there's another mana rock in here that we could take out or something along those lines. Verdict. Prince Imahil the Fair we could potentially take out. Elven Chorus we could potentially take out, but I think it's just a little bit too good if we're going to use it. Rohan. Let's see. Throne of the High City could be potentially a good one. I think the Inherited Envelope, like Bilbo's Ring, I think is what I replace the Inherited Envelope with, just because the card draw is better. Limbus Bread, potentially we could take out, but I don't know. Thought Vessel I'm on the fence with because this one, I mean, it's 2 cost just for plain mana, but you have no maximum hand size. I feel like the maximum hand size could be a big deal. Because we have cards that let us draw additional cards, and we have cards that let us scry. So I don't know how many cards are going to be drawing in this deck. And also him searching Gundor is potentially part of the thing, so it probably fits. But Grey Havens, Bilbo's Ring. I think it's just too good not to have. Intis Restoration we could replace, potentially. But I mean, it's giving us multiple lands, potentially, as well as a 4/4 buff. Birthday Escape, Many Partings, Rogue's Passage, Greatest of the Eagles, Horn of the Mark. Blasphemous Act. There's really only that one mana rock. God, that sucks. Because if I get rid of a land for it, it's just gonna hurt. But the Ring tempting you early, like, that could be big. Add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. I mean, they're basically the same, except for Inherited Envelope is 1 more. Foil. Magic rings are magical, and they are rare and curious, Gandalf. Keep it secret, keep it safe, Gandalf. God, that's very tough calls, man. I mean, we could take out a land for it, but I don't particularly want to. Even if it is a mana rock. We're at like 44 mana things, I think, though. Which is way more than I usually run in decks. Gandalf the Grey. It has to be a mana ability. Have to be something mana-wise. We got, okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm not going to count the treasure token ones. We have like 2 treasure token cards. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Mm, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Yeah, so we got like we got like 37 or 38 lands, and then like 2 or 3 like random like land searches or mana cards, and then we have like I think 2 cards that on combat damage can give us treasure tokens. So we could drop a land, go down to like 36 lands. That would give us like 40 something mana cards. And we'd have all the scries. Like anytime we play something, like we'd get to scry and look for a land if we needed to after 4, which is kind of a hard thing to figure out here. Also, if we drop a plain, like we drop a basic land, we'd be down to like 7. Let me look at the blue. I think the blue had the most. We took a blue last time. I'll look at the white and then the blue. So it'll be 1 white, 2, 3, 4, I guess 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, do 15, 16, 17, I guess. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So we have a lot of, I guess 30 or 20, 29. So we have the most white mana generation, I think, here. I think green is the least that we have, but we actually have quite a few green cards. So I really don't know how this mana base is going to hold up over time, but let's see. So if we're going to add blue, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So we have a lot of mana potential. I'm tempted to take out 1 plains and 1 forest. That would give us 6 basic lands. And then we could add in the inherited envelope as well as 1 additional spell, which would probably be the Bath Song or Marshall's Anthem. But 6 lands, we have, I think, 4 cards that bring out basic lands. So you have the Shire, and then 2 other sack lands, and then a spell, I believe, that all give us basic lands. But what are the odds that you run across those and the basic lands? That's the real question. Plus, I mean, we're removing a land for another card that gives us mana and a ring temps, which can give us additional card draw. So, hard to say. So we have the old forest. So if we were going to take out a forest, I would take out... Basically, I would keep in one of each land that has a unique artwork if I was going to do this. That's the Rohan Plains. Okay, let's see here. Keeping in Thought Vessel. So you have the Rohan Plains and the Old Forest. Okay. This is the Mirkwood Forest. Shire Plains. So we're missing our... We literally ran past them, I guess. I think the Bath Song would be the best, though, because draw 2 cards and you discard a card, and then you shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library, and you add 2 mana. So, I mean, kind of a mana rock, kind of graveyard recursion, and card draw on one. Alright, so this is Mirkwood. And I think the other thing was a Shire card. So we got Mirkwood, Old Forest. Then you got Rohan. So we need the other forest. Citadel. Yeah, this is Rohan. Okay, let's look at this again. So we got Mirkwood. The Old Forest. This is Rohan, so we took away the copy. And then we have... nothing else that is in here that's a copy. So now we go to the other half. Oh, God. So this is going to put us down to like 36 to 35 lands or mana cards or something. Be more on par with what I usually have. I don't know what the mana thing is on this deck, though. Mana curve. Okay, so let me look for... We're looking for a forest. Let us find the forest here. Mantis Restoration. Island. Shire. Okay, this is the Mirkwood Forest. Kind of a big deal. So, this now means that we have no copies of any lands in the deck. We will be losing 1 land, which is going to be the Mirkwood Forest, for the Inherited Envelope, which will temp us and give us 1 mana of any color. Boom. Tink. And then we will slip these extra forests and stuff into a binder at some point. And then the plains of Rohan we're going to replace with the Bath Song, I suppose, which is going to give us draw 2, discard a card, then draw 2, discard a card, and then shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library and add 2 blue mana. So temporary mana ramp as well as draw 4. It's basically draw 4 because then those discarded cards are going to go back into your library So draw 4, then get 2 additional mana, and you have 4. And this is a historic card, so Samwise Gamgee. If he comes in, we can sack food tokens and then bring back the Bath Song to our hand and then play it, scry 2, and then get the draw 4 double time on there. So that's going to be good. And this puts us a lot closer to the overall thing. I think the Bath Song is probably at the end of the movie. I'm going to say it's at the end of the movie after they destroy the ring and they get to wash off and then everyone's all happy and stuff. I think that's going to be the play, actually. And then we're going to stick inherited envelope over here. And this goes over here. And then we need what? We need a card sleeve. Card sleeve. I know I have a couple over at the other house still, but we'll see if there's anything over here that I don't really care about. Yeah, this is the stuff like Lash of Balrog. Yeah. I need to put Lash of Balrog into the Mordor deck eventually, because it's a destroy target creature spell. If you don't sack a creature, you have to pay 4, but the sack a creature could be good for saving your stuff at some point. I will take out, I guess, Relentless Rohirrim and use its card sleeve for this here Plains. Shrink. Cool. And now we have an extremely awesome deck. So we have the Inherited Envelope and Bilbo's Ring. So if we ever do the Lord of the Rings game mode where when one of those come into play, you get access to the one ring, that would be pretty crazy. But also, those 2 cards only make sense in the Fellowship deck because Mordor and them don't get access to that. So that's pretty good. So if you ever were going to do this, I would say it only comes into play if those cards activate the one ring. So you'd have the Fellowship deck, and then if the Fellowship deck ran across the ring cards, it would put it into play. And that could be pretty good. And then for the evil side, I guess we would put Gollum into play. So if Gollum entered the battlefield, that would put it in for the evil side, and then if the Fellowship found it, that would put it in for the good side. I think that's how we should do it, potentially. Yeah, because they just say that Gollum found the envelope or the one ring, and it popped out. And it'd be a war between those two. But basically, if Gollum got the ring, then Mordor would try to take it from Gollum, and Gollum wouldn't want to lose it. And then if the Fellowship got the ring, Mordor would want it, and they wouldn't want to lose it. So that would be good. And then the elves and the Fellowship would work together. And then Mordor and Gollum would work together. Sort of, I guess. Yeah, I think that's probably what you do. You do Gollum and Mordor, and then you do elves and Fellowship. Because Gollum, if you make a Gollum deck with creatures, the creatures would be fighting the elves as well as looking for the ring. And then the Fellowship deck would be fighting Mordor and looking for the ring. And then if either of them got it, you'd have a big power swing and you'd be fighting over it. So 2v2. I think I like this. But we need to make an Elven deck now. Yeah, so that's going to be really good. Anyway, this is the Fellowship deck that is based on the movies. So now we're at like 36 to 37. I think like 36 lands, and then we have enough mana for like 41 total mana cards or something like that now, where it used to be like 50. I want to look at the kind of mana in this deck though, because the commander is a 4-drop. So that's already, and then we have a lot of tap lands. So we have 2-drop, 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 1-drop, 2-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 1-drop, 4-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, X card, 2-drop, 5-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 3-drop, 1-drop, 1-drop, 3-drop, 1-drop, 1-drop, 2-drop, 5-drop, 3-drop, 3-drop, 5-drop, 4-drop, 2-drop, 4-drop, 3-drop, 5-drop, and 9-drop for Blasphemous Act, 2-drop. I don't know, there's like 4 or 5, like 4 or 5 drops there. 3-drop, 3-drop, 2-drop, 4-drop, 4-drop, 3-drop, 5-drop, 4-drop, 2-drop, 4-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, 5-drop, 1-drop, 4-drop, X-drop, 3-drop, 2-drop, 4-drop, 3-drop, 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 2-drop, 5-drop, 5-6-drop, 4-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 2-drop, 5-drop. I don't know. There's a lot of. God, it feels pretty balanced. Like there's a lot of 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5 drops. And then a couple of like pretty expensive cards above that. But it feels like if you manage to get like 4 or 5 mana on board, you'd be all right for the most part. Okay. Anyway, that was that deck, and I'm gonna try and I guess make a deck list on the internet and post it somewhere. Give it a shot. Tell me what you think. Post me comments. Send me a whisper, and we will check it out pretty soon. Okay. Y'all guys have a good one.